All right. We're live. Stream health is good. It took me extra time. Actually, the camera was easy to fix, but I don't know how to save all of these windows as one single unit. And so I don't know if I should have just turned off the computer and let them stay up. I completely forgot. It's been a while since I've worked on the PC, actually. So I screwed up. But we're back. Just so you know, it's 20 after 6 my time. I forgot my... Can't hear myself talk. There we go. So anyway, it's 20 after 6 my time. So we've got, we're on page 140 here. And this has another, I believe, about 100 pages to go. Let's see here. Yep, just 98 pages to go. And they broke at 5:01. And it's 12:19 there. So we're looking at about, if things keep right, looking at about 3 more hours and we'll be done. I know late night, but I really had to get this out right away. That's just the way I roll. I would not have been able to sleep if I hadn't done this today. Okay, so we're going back on the record. We're now going to be hearing from the minority side, the Democratic side, which, as you may have noticed, and I've noticed in all of the previous transcripts, they're all women. It's all men on the Republican side, and it's all women on the Democratic side. Not saying that's good, not saying that's bad. It's just something I've noticed. So we're up to the Ms. team now. So, Ms. Kim, back on the record. The hour of the time is 2:19 p.m. That's what it says. Bye, Ms. Kim. Mr. Papadopoulos, thank you for coming back. I don't think you had much of a choice. Thank you. Earlier, you characterized Mr. Mifsud as, quote, this guy who knows everyone in Moscow, that he was putting on that self-presentation. Is that accurate that you said that earlier? I would say he presented that he knew everyone around the world, including Moscow. And what representation specifically led you specifically to believe that he had deep connections in Russia? I guess at the time, I just took him at his word that he knew high-level government officials around the world without actually asking for proof beforehand before believing him. Certainly. So he characterized himself with having deep connections with Russian officials in Moscow. I believe so, yeah. Did he mention any specific officials in making that representation to you? I can't remember if he mentioned any particular people. I just know who he introduced me to. Did he mention any particular entities in Russia with regard to his connections? Did he mention the Kremlin? I can't remember exactly who he said he was connected to. Maybe I just know from researching him now. I know he had connections to the Valdai discussion group, which I'm not sure if he told me that when I met him or if I researched that later. So I just can't really remember who exactly he told me he was connected to in Russia. I remember him mentioning that he was some sort of colleague or friend of the Vietnamese leader, though. Certainly. You attested in your statement of the offense that you had read every word, that your attorneys had read every word, and agreed that it was true and correct. Is that generally right? Yes. Excuse me. A little surprise here. I didn't know my tea hadn't been finished. I've got to add some honey, which I can't because the lid is frozen with dried honey. Someone just got demoted from executive producer. They might have to make her a line producer for now. Okay. Put that on. I'm really sorry, folks. This was a complete surprise. Okay. Not enough honey. I screwed up. Anyway. Let's see. So, agreed that it was true and correct. Is that generally right? Yes. In that statement of the offense, it is said that Mr. Mifsud communicates to you that he had communicated with Russian officials prior to telling you that the Russians had dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of emails. Is that right? That is what I remember, yeah. And what Russian officials did Mr. Mifsud said he had communicated with? That's the thing I don't remember, who he was communicating with exactly. But he communicated that he had communicated with particular Russian officials, Russia. He was coming from exactly how it's stated in the, you don't recall with precision which Russian officials he mentioned, but he did. He did make reference to the fact that he had specific contacts in Russia who were informing him that there were emails in Russia's possession about Hillary Clinton. That's my understanding, yes. Now, again, the point that I made reading the William Barr letter to the heads of the judiciary committees yesterday. According to Mueller, Russia hacked the emails. According to things I've seen in the interim, I mean, before that, they were stolen. They were not hacked by Russia. I'm waiting to hear if WikiLeaks has come out with a statement defending itself against the special counsel's charges that they were in bed with the Russians about this whole email leak. I haven't had a chance to look at Twitter today. Yeah, I'm back on Twitter, but you're not going to be able to contact me. I'm not talking with anyone. I'm just following people. Yeah, so I need it as a research device. I just can't not do it until people move. But yeah, so did the Russians hack the emails, or were they stolen from within the DNC and the Hillary campaign? Maybe both. Maybe the Russians hacked the Hillary emails, which is entirely possible because of her server being completely unprotected for months. And then it was local people who hacked the Podesta, or stole the Podesta and DNC emails. Maybe both. He had specific contacts in Russia who were informing him that there were emails in Russia's possession about Hillary Clinton. That's my understanding, yes. You mentioned also that you had ongoing conversation with Olga and another individual who was affiliated with Russian International Affairs Council. Is that right? Yes. With regard to Olga, you mentioned that she discussed sanctions with you in your correspondence. Does that ring a bell? I believe she did over email. And what was the position on sanctions that she expressed over email? I can't remember exactly, but we are happy to share them with. We have those emails in case you don't, and are more than happy to share them with you. Excellent. Now, this is kind of weird. This has happened every time now. In the previous transcripts, in the previous hearings, they had all the documentation. They had all the texts between Strzok and Page. They had statements by Bruce Orr that they were able to reference between each other. But in this case, it's as if there's this whole complete cache of documents that the the committee did not get, but that they're totally welcome to have. Did they not ask for them ahead of time? What's going on here? It's really weird that they have to keep saying back and forth, I'd be happy to give them to you if you like, or, I may need to look at it to refresh my memory, but I recall it was around a certain time. I don't quite get it. It's very strange. I'm sure there's a simple explanation to it, but it's one that's so far eluding me. What about the individual who discussed geopolitics, who was I'm sure it's supposed to be affiliated, with the Russian International Affairs Council? It's Ivan Timofeyev. And did Ivan Timofeyev, what did he discuss about geopolitical issues? I think you summarized it earlier as Russia, as Syria, etc. Yeah, so what I remember is we had a Skype call, and at that time, I don't know, Syria was a big issue, still is today. Not so much now. But it was an even bigger issue back then. And I just think he was just basically talking about Syria, what Russian might or might not be doing there, and the Russia-Israel relationship, and something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what else the conversation entailed, though. So was he summarizing to you Russia's position on Syria? Something along those lines, yeah, that's what I remember. What other geopolitical issues did he bring up, other than Syria? The only things I remember were Syria and the Russia-Israel relationship. What did he say about the Russia-Israel relationship? I can't remember exact details of what he was talking about. I just remember that generally... I'm sorry, my back is killing me all of a sudden. I just remember that generally was what he was talking about. Did he correspond with you about any geopolitical issues in email? We certainly exchanged some emails. I can't remember exactly what's in those emails, but I'm more than happy to provide them to the committee. Excuse me just a moment. Hey, sweetheart, can you bring me 3 ibuprofen, please? Oh, I see you all heard that.
Well, I'm sorry, I set it down there like 6-7 minutes before you.
Yeah, I wasn't looking, sweetheart. I was very busy.
I'm sorry, I just didn't want to do the wrong thing.
I would rather you done it wrong.
Well, I called out on your podcast about it, so.
Yeah, because I almost knocked it over with my elbow. I had no idea it was wide open. And you should bring me a napkin when you give me honey. Now my hands are all sticky. Great, spilled it. Oh, it's a fresh one.
Yep. Made sure before I brought it.
Thank you. Okay. I apologize again for the shout out in your ears, my screaming for drugs. I hope that didn't hurt anybody who was on headphones. All right, let's get back to it. Should take about 20 minutes and I'll be fine. Did he correspond with you about any geopolitical issues in email? We certainly exchanged some emails. I can't remember exactly what's in those emails, but I'm more than happy to provide them to the committee. Excellent. Again, weird. Excellent. I'd also like to ask you about your involvement on the transition team. I think you said to the Republicans earlier that you remain involved in the Trump transition team. Is that accurate? Involved meaning passing along information. And like I stated even to you earlier, that I'd heard something from the Greek government, I'd pass it along. And then I was put in touch with transition officials to potentially talk about it. Did you apply for a job in the Trump administration? I can't remember if I actually formally submitted something for consideration, but I was in touch with an individual named Rob Whitmore. I can't remember when I was in touch with him about formally applying or him helping me get a job. Something along those lines, yeah. Did you participate in any briefings or meetings for the transition team? Face-to-face, no. It was all over email. And I'm more than happy to provide all the emails you require between Flynn, myself, and transition officials. Q. I'd also like to ask you about some of the communications that you referenced earlier with Trump campaign officials. You said earlier that you provided notes on President Trump's, then candidate Trump's, big foreign policy speech to Stephen Miller? Yes. What was the substance of those comments? I can't remember, but I'm more than happy to share them because it's all there in email form. it's all in an email form. And you said that you communicated with Steve Bannon by email as well. Is that right? Yes. Would you be email and a couple of phone calls? What was that? Would you be willing to share those emails with Steve Bannon with us as well? I'm more than happy to share whatever emails I have with the campaign with the committee. What context did you have with Jared Kushner? Never spoke to Jared or met him in my life. Can you describe to me your relationship with Walid Ferries? Yes. Walid was a part of the 5-member Foreign Policy Advisory Committee, I believe. He was certainly copied on many emails that I was sending to the campaign, which had to do with Russia, other countries, talking points, you name it. He was certainly on it. Like I said, I'm more than happy to share every email I have sent to the campaign to the committee. He was part of, there was a summit called the TAG Summit, which part of a European Union parliamentary delegation that I was invited to attend with Sam Clovis, and Walid Ferries was there. I can't remember exactly what month that delegation came in, but they met with our campaign, and they met with Clinton's campaign as well. And Walid was there, just colleagues. I'm not sure exactly what I can say about him. You mentioned a number of emails where both of you would have been copied. Did you and Mr. Ferries have any direct communication, just the two of you? We met face-to-face at the TAG Summit, and then we obviously met at the March 31st meeting. And I can't remember if we met another time in person or not, but we certainly were in correspondence for months over email. Did you discuss your efforts to set up the Putin-Trump meeting with Mr. Ferries? I'm not sure he was copied on those particular emails, but I could send whatever emails I have with him to the committee. It's fine with me. What communications did you have with Sebastian Gorka? Woohoo! Dr. Seb. I don't think I ever spoke to him while I was on the Trump campaign. I think while I was on the Carson campaign, I might have sent him a LinkedIn message, or he sent me one. I can't remember exactly, but I can look through my LinkedIn and see exactly. But I'm almost certain I had almost zero communications with Sebastian Gorka while I was officially on the Trump campaign. What communication did you have with John Mashburn? Certainly some emails. I believe other emails we exchanged. I met him in person once at the RNC convention where I was speaking on the panel. And I met him through Rick Dearborn, I think, during the RNC convention in Cleveland, and Bo Denisick. And so it was Bo Denisick, John Mashburn, Rick Dearborn, and myself. This guy knows a lot of people with weird last names. And we were kind of talking. They were just asking me what countries I was going to, what was I up to. They just seemed very intrigued with some of the stuff I was doing. What interactions did you have with Tom Barrack? I don't think I've ever met Tom Barrack in my life. What interactions did you have with Rick Gates? I don't think I ever had any interactions with Rick Gates. I think what I have read, I think the emails I sent to Manafort about this potential meeting was then sent to Rick Gates, and he responded, but I don't think I was ever on any direct or indirect communications with Rick Gates himself. Do you have any direct or indirect communication with Donald Trump Jr.? The only thing that comes to my mind about Donald Trump Jr. was there was this event for, I guess it was called Greek Americans for Trump, that the campaign wanted me to speak to, and I think Don Jr.'s or one of kids, maybe one of his secretaries was privy to that. And I had invited one of the kids' secretaries was privy to that. And I had invited one of the kids to come with me to speak, and they said the kids can't make it, but you should go ahead. Something along those lines. But I have never met Don Jr. in my life, and I have never had any real direct contact with him. By the kids, you mean the Trump children? The Trump children, yes. That's a rather cavalier way of referring to them. Maybe that was how the campaign used a little verbal shorthand. It just seems to me to be kind of flippant. But again, that could have been a campaign thing. Did you have any interaction with any of the Trump children? Face-to-face or directly over email? No. Now we're at Ms. H. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions related to the transition time. So you had mentioned in the campaign that you had wanted to work in some capacity in the administration, correct? I believe so, yes. And it is my understanding that you interviewed with an Athens paper, the Daily Kathimerini, in December 2016. Yes, I met with a journalist from that newspaper for around 5 or 10 minutes. This guy's killing me. And so they wrote an article about their conversation with you. And in that interview, you were quoted as saying, and I quote, the new president had given him a blank check to choose any role he wanted in government for him, end quote, and that you helped Trump win the presidency. So this is from the article. So I'm curious, when did this phone call with President Trump occur? Well, I think, unlike this country, well, maybe like this country, I think the Greek journalists have a wild imagination and were trying to sell a couple of newspapers. I don't recall ever telling this person that. In fact, if this is the same person we were talking about, I was sitting in the lobby of the Grand Bretagne Hotel, and she found me there, and she was in sweatpants. And I was just like, oh, hey. I was trying to get up because I had a meeting to go to, and I think she was just, I don't know. I don't remember ever telling her anything like that, and there was no call with Donald Trump. I have met Donald Trump once in my life at this March 31st meeting, so I don't know what quote she could have possibly been talking about. So you are saying you did not have a phone call with Donald Trump regarding your working for the administration? No, absolutely not. Ms. Shen. So I'd like to go back to your interviews with the FBI in the beginning of 2017. So you were interviewed by the FBI on January 27, 2017. Does that comport with your recollection? Yes. And did the FBI approach you about the interview, or did you approach them? My recollection is that they called me while I was getting out of the shower, and they said they are outside my house and they wanted to talk. Wow. Wow. That's not pushy at all. Just obviously, every step of the way, they're trying to rattle him. Every step of the way. This was a setup from the word go, in my opinion. And again, you'd be hard-pressed to talk me out of that opinion. And did you talk to them? And did you talk that same day? Yes. And so the interviews conducted at your house? No. They came to my house, basically alluded to the fact that they wanted to talk to me about Sergei Milian, or my friend in New York, who two days before they came to my house was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal as the source of the Steele dossier. So when they came to my house, my initial impression was, okay, I'm going to talk about Sergei. And then I said, that's fine, and we went down to the Chicago office. So you went down to the Chicago FBI field office? Yes. Well, hello, Ray. Very happy to see you, sir. Very happy. Welcome to the conversation. We've got about 88 pages to go, and we'll be done. So sit back and enjoy the ride. This is a quick recap. They've been talking with Papadopoulos about his contacts, and so far it looks like every one of the contacts he had was a setup. He maybe initiated one conversation, and everything else, people came to him. So he was definitely targeted, in my opinion. Now we just got to his first interview with the FBI in Chicago. So I'll start the question again. So he went down to the Chicago FBI field office. Yes. Was the interview? Yes, kitty cat. Was the interview voluntary? Yes. And did the FBI tell you that you had to be truthful during the interview because you would get into trouble if you lied? I believe they said that. Yes. And what exactly did the FBI say they wanted to interview about? You mentioned Sergei Milian. Was there anything else that they mentioned? Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, I told the judge who sentenced me there were a lot of topics that they wanted to talk about, and I think the FBI made themselves clear. The FBI themselves made it clear that Sergei Milian was really just an excuse to get me to talk, that wasn't really why they wanted to talk to me. So again, a complete setup. I guess you know, what did they say to you? We want to talk to you because of Sergei Milian. And then, so when they came to my home, they said that, as I remember it, there is a transcript somewhere, but I don't want to get anything wrong. We want to talk to you about your friend in New York. And in my mind, my friend in New York was just on the front page of the Wall Street Journal as a source for the Steele dossier, or should I say, an acquaintance of mine. And I said, okay, I'll come down and I'll talk. But then the conversation pivoted from that to, are you being cultivated by the Israelis? Are you something along the lines of hacking? Who is involved? Do you know anything? And that's the same interview in which I told them, hey, this person, Joseph Misfud. So the actual words that were used was, quote, friend in New York. I can't be quoted on that. I'm just, how I remembered it was, we wanted to talk about your friend in New York, something like that. There is a transcript somewhere. Well, you don't recall them specifically saying Sergei Millian at the time, do you? I don't remember. Did you tell the FBI that you were willing to cooperate during the investigation, during the interview? I believe I did, yes. And during the interview, the FBI asked you questions about any contacts you may have had with Professor Misfud. Is that correct? According to my recollection, and I'm glad we are clarifying things, they never asked me anything directly about Joseph Misfud. It was I who brought up the name Joseph Misfud in the conversation. So that's something I think we should clarify. Okay, so when you brought up Joseph Misfud in the conversation, what was the reasonable context that it had come up in? As far as I remember from reading my sentencing memorandum, or there was a small footnote, they were asking if I had any information that the Russian government officials would have hacked or before involved in email things. As far as what I remember from what I read, I said no, but there was this Maltese guy named Joseph Misfud who told me XYZ, and then the conversation just Q. And then the FBI, did they ask you follow-up questions about Mr. Misfud? I can't remember what they asked me afterwards. I guess I remember I felt that they weren't really too shocked when I mentioned his name, which struck me as very odd. So what exactly did you relay to the FBI about Misfud at the time? As far as I remember, I told them that in direct answer to their question about whether a Russian official had discussed hacking or Russian interference, I brought up his name and said a Maltese person named Joseph Misfud. Name. I'm almost ready to say just Joseph Sud. Joseph Misfud told me that the Russians have thousands of Hillary Clinton's emails. And then that's really what I remember most about my dialogue about Joseph Misfud with the FBI at that meeting. So, did the FBI respond in any way? Did they ask you how credible you believe this information to be? I can't remember about that, but I remember maybe a couple days afterwards, Agent Curtis Heidi emailed me and said something along the lines of, he asked me if I could provide some contact info, I think, about Joseph Misfud and Olga in an email. He sent me an email. I can't really remember exactly what the email was all about, but. So, in that same interview, was there also a discussion about Olga? I can't remember, but there must have been some conversation about her. I just can't really remember exactly how she was brought up or whether I brought her up. I'm sorry, was that laughed at all or caught all during your Bruce Orr New Agent 86 and Nellie Agent 99? Oh man, what a perfect reference. Oh, gosh. I wish I'd had you there. I would have used that through the whole thing. That's brilliant. That's just absolutely brilliant, Ray. Agent 86 and Agent 99. For those of you who don't remember, there was a spy spoof show back in the 60s, early 70s called Get Smart with Don Adams. And it was hilarious. The thing is, they came up with all these cute little weird spy gadgets, and some of them were actual spy gadgets that had been used. There was a shoe that turned into a telephone. There actually was a shoe communication device developed. I can't remember if it was by the East or the West. And they had a thing called the cone of, I think it was the cone of silence. Correct me on this if I'm wrong, Ray. Where if they wanted to have a meeting with only two people where they couldn't be eavesdropped on, they sat at opposite ends of a fairly short table, and this device dropped down from the ceiling, or they crawled in underneath it, and there was a bell at one end, and then a connector, and then a bell at the other end. But their voices echoed so badly that they could never understand each other, and they would wind up ducking out from under the bell and shouting to each other, thereby completely obviating the purpose of the device. The CIA tried to develop one. Based on the show. The CIA tried to develop one. I don't know if it's on Netflix or whatever, but it's called Get Smart. And you should really look it up. Agent 99 was his girlfriend. Oh gosh, her name suddenly escapes me, the actress's name. Just shouted at me from the executive producer. She's promoted again. Barbara Feldon. Beautiful, beautiful brunette. But again, a terrific show. You got to check it out. Let's see. Let's see. So in that same interview, was there also discussion about Olga? I can't remember, but there must have been some conversation about her. I just can't really remember exactly how she was brought up or whether I brought her up. Q. Because if the agent is asking for both of their contact information, then presumably, I'm just guessing, right, that her name would have come up in the A. Yeah, I assume so too. I just can't remember exactly because there was almost, and again, I'm reading these verbatim, there was almost 2 years ago. So during that January interview, did the FBI ask you if you had any contacts with Russian nationals or anyone with a Russian accent? I remember the Russian accent parts, and I assume they said a Russian national. And I just can't remember if I then brought up Olga or if they brought her up. I just can't remember exactly how that went down, but there is a transcript out there somewhere. So do you recall what you would have responded? You said you don't quite recall if you brought up Olga, but do you remember anyone else, any other individuals or names that you might have told the FBI in response to that question? I mean, the facts are that my Russian contacts, I guess, if you will call them that, was Joseph Misfud, Olga, and Ivan Timofev. I just don't think I have any other Russia connection. So did you discuss Ivan Timofev with the FBI during that January? I can't remember if I did or not. Were you generally in contact with Ivan Timofev in the 2016 election? Sporadically, over emails, a couple of Skype calls. I am more than happy to provide that contact to the committee if you don't have those emails ready. Q. I'm sorry. I know we discussed this, but why did you become in contact with Ivan Timofev? Why did you begin discussions with him? My understanding is that Joseph Misfud introduced us over email as somebody that might be helpful for me to get a quick understanding of where the U.S.-Russia relationship said at the time, considering he was an academic, and that he potentially had contacts in Russia, could facilitate a meeting between Trump and Putin. So after that January meeting or interview with the FBI, did you ever mention that you had an interview with the FBI to anyone on the Trump campaign? I don't think I did. I don't think I have a memory of that, no. And did you, sorry, I had to look at something. And did you ever talk to anyone who is currently a member of the Trump administration about that interview with the FBI? I have not been in touch with anyone really, as far as I remember, since the transition, quite frankly. And you didn't talk to anyone from the Trump organization about that interview with the FBI? I don't think I did, no. So you were interviewed again by the FBI. I can't remember if I reached out to Mark Kasowitz about either that or my subpoena from the Senate. And I emailed him and I said, look, would you be interested in representing me? I think that's what happened. But I can't remember exactly why I emailed him, but I think I emailed Mark Kasowitz's firm sometime after the interview. But I don't remember if he ever responded or anything like that. Q. So this A. I don't know if he's part of the Trump organization or someone in an orbit, I guess you could call it. Right. So when you sent this email, would it have been after the first FBI interview, but before the second one, or I think it would be after I was done with my initial contacts with the FBI? Okay. And it was around the time I will have to double check, okay? And I could perhaps see that email is around and I could provide it to you. Mr. Pierce, that may be privileged, George. Ms. Shen. Because you had a second interview in February, is your recollection that if you emailed Kasowitz's firm that this would have been after that February meeting as well? Yes. So that's what I remember. Okay. So you were interviewed by the FBI again on February 16, 2017. Does that sound right? Yes. And for that interview, did the FBI also approach you, or did Did the FBI approach you to conduct that interview, or did you approach them? I don't know how that meeting was conducted because I think I had counsel present at the meeting you were talking about, so perhaps they organized it. Okay, so by the end of the second meeting, you had hired counsel to help? So there were 3, I guess, interactions I had with the FBI. As I spoke about earlier, there was my initial interview where I had no lawyers present. There was a second one-on-one meeting between myself and Agent Curtis Heidi in Chicago, where I had no counsel present, where he asked me to wear a wire of some nature. And then the third meeting where the DOJ brought lawyers in with the FBI. My counsel was present at that meeting. And who was your counsel at the time? It was Thomas Breen and Robert Stanley, and perhaps I had George Burbis, phonetic spelling, on my team at that time. I'm not sure when he left, and when did you hire these counsels? Because it would have been sometime between the January and February interviews, is that right? I can't remember exactly when I hired them, but it must have been because I didn't have counsel during my first interview. Bad move. Again, everyone, it's all in our nature to assist law enforcement in any way we can. We want to be helpful, we want to be truthful. But George Papadopoulos is trusting the FBI to do right by him, to listen to him, and to understand what he was saying, and to be understanding if he made a mistake. Cost him a felony conviction and 12 days in jail. Always have a lawyer present. Always. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm involved in some things that could require lawyers at a moment's notice. So, have a lawyer. And why did you decide to hire counsel after the first FBI interview, or was it after the one-on-one meeting? Well, after my first interview, I figured talking to the FBI and they're emailing you, it is probably smart to lawyer up a bit. So on February 16, 2017, now you have counsel, and now you're going to talk to the FBI again. During that interview, did you offer any new information? Were there new topics discussed? As far as I remember at that meeting, the FBI was asking if they could have the contact info of Joseph Misfud and Olga. I believe my counsel provided it. And they asked me if I had met a friendly Western diplomat in a bar, I think. And I said, I don't remember because I met many diplomats in many bars. And if they're asking him specifically about Downer, then no, that was not a friendly Western diplomat. Downer was a complete jerk, and I could use much stronger language to describe that interaction as it's described by George earlier. So, yeah, not a friendly Western diplomat. Diplomat of a friendly Western country, yes, but not a friendly diplomat. And I said I don't remember because I met many diplomats in many bars. I really didn't know which one they were talking about. And then I believe they asked me then, too, if I shared information with the campaign, but I am not 100% sure about that. You would have to look at any transcripts that might exist or may not exist. Did they ask you anything else that you can recall? During that February meeting, that's what I remember. So following your February 16 interview, you deactivated your Facebook account. Is that correct? I believe so. Can you explain why? Again, verbatim. Ms. Polisi, I'm just going to object to this one line of questioning because I do think it involves substantial attorney-client relationship privilege. Shen, I'm sorry, for clarification, because I just don't understand why this line of questioning involves, you said, attorney-client relationships? Polisi, yes, attorney-client privileged information. Ms. Shen, I guess I'm just not understanding because, it is a Facebook account. It's been deactivated. It is public knowledge. So what about it is, Polisi, it is very active. Describing what about I would think would impede upon that relationship as well. I'm going to object to this line of questioning. Just leave it at that. By Ms. Kim. So the FBI asked you to wear a wire to record Mr. Misfud during your February interview with the FBI? No, during my second encounter with Curtis Heide. Which was when? Shortly after my first interview with them. After that second encounter with the FBI, did you continue to communicate with Professor Misfud? I think I stopped communicating with him. I had not communicated with him for some time. Actually, up until that interview, and then certainly, as far as I can remember, I don't think I spoke with him at all after the FBI came to my house. Prior to stopping communicating with him, what were the different channels that you used to communicate with him? Did you use Facebook to communicate with him? I believe so. Did you use email to communicate with him? I believe so. Skype? I can't remember if I ever used Skype. Well, certainly email, and I believe Facebook. When was the last time you remember communicating with Professor Misfud? Off the top of my memory, I think it was the summer of 2016. Do you remember why you stopped communicating with him? I can't remember exactly. I just didn't really think he was a man of real substance at some point. Okay. I would like to go back, though, to your conversation with him in April of 2016. So can you give me a better sense of when that meeting concluded, and then when you emailed Stephen Miller about interesting messages coming out of Russia about the meeting? Sure. So as I remember it, we met for lunch at the Andaz Hotel in London, and he drops this information on me. And then, we probably talked about other things, but I just can't really remember what the other things were, but that was probably the most important piece of information from that meeting. And then I think I had a scheduled call later that day with Stephen Miller. That never went through. And I emailed him, I believe, that same day about interesting messages coming in from Moscow. You also said that you continued to suggest this Trump-Putin summit, but eventually you found out that the campaign just wasn't interested. Can you tell me the process by which you came to understand that the campaign wasn't interested in setting up a Trump-Putin meeting? Yes. As I remember it, by the time Manafort took the helm of the campaign, I just emailed him, "Are we interested in this or not?" I think I forwarded to him an email from Ivan Timofeyev where he's asking for a letter to be signed by the campaign if this is a serious proposal or not. Something like that. All right, does that strike anyone else as weird? A signed letter from the campaign? Wouldn't just a email from someone higher up on the food chain suffice to let you know they're still wanting to do it? Couldn't you just say, "Hey, George, can you give me someone's email who can give me a better clarification of whether or not Trump can meet with Putin?" Why would you need a... That's like a letter of intent, for crying out loud. Is this a diplomatic thing I don't know anything about? And again, as I've stated earlier, I need to state again, the Mueller report, the summary from Barr to Congress, stated that despite overtures or reach outs, I'm using the wrong phrase, but you understand what I'm saying, the Russia-affiliated individuals reaching out to the Trump campaign to coordinate or collude, the campaign, I believe the phrase is rebuffed them at every turn. I believe the word rebuffed was used. Here's another example of people trying to push the Trump campaign into a connection to Russia that they're not interested in, and they blow him off. A nice example of what the Barr letter actually said or meant. Let's see. Signed letter, serious proposal, and I don't think I ever received a response from Manafort. And you just put two and two together, so no one's interested, so stop it. So it was not until, do you remember when Mr. Manafort took over the campaign manager position? I don't remember when he took on the campaign. Do you remember if it was around the time that you were talking to Mr. Miller about interesting messages, or if it was sometime after that? I think probably after, but sometime after that, wasn't it? I think so, yeah. Asked and answered. And you kind of picked up on the fact that the campaign was not interested in the meeting, not from an explicit affirmative communication from a campaign official, but because Paul Manafort never responded to an email that you sent. That's how I remember it. And there might have been an email telling me no, or somebody might have told me no to my face. I just can't remember all my interactions with the campaign from 2 years ago, unfortunately. Certainly. You stated that you attended the big foreign policy opening meeting with Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump when the picture came out. Is that right? That's right. You've accounted to the press that sometime during that meeting, you raised the possibility of a meeting between Trump and Putin. Can you describe how Mr. Sessions reacted to your offer of that type of meeting? Excuse me a second. Is the chat frozen? No. Okay. I felt that the senator was quite enthusiastic about a potential meeting. And how could you tell that he was enthusiastic about a potential meeting? That was just my impression, and that's why, looking back, I continued to pursue it. Or else if your superior is telling you, no, you shouldn't do this, there was no reason why I would continue to do it. I mean, that is just how I remember it at the time. So do you remember maybe some kind of nonverbal cue from Mr. Sessions suggesting that he was enthusiastic about the idea of a Putin? There was something that I felt he was enthusiastic about, and that's why I continued to pursue this. I guess it was a stupid idea, but I continued to pursue it. Was Carter Page present when you raised this idea? I don't think he was, no. I don't think they was in the meeting, again verbatim. Was Bert Mitsusawa present when you raised this? I believe so. And what was Bert's reaction to your raising the possibility of a Putin-Trump meeting? I can't remember because I think he was sitting to the side of me, but there are a lot of people in the room who were disapproving of this meeting. Was Stephen Miller in the room? Was Stephen Miller in the room when you mentioned? I don't know if he was at the time I mentioned it, but I saw him afterwards. Do you remember anyone else in the room having a positive reaction to your suggesting that Trump and Putin should meet? Quite honestly, I couldn't care less at the time what any of the other associates thought of it. I was just looking at candidate Trump and Senator Sessions. And candidate Trump simply, he was non-committal. He just nodded, and then he deferred to Jeff Sessions to see what he thought, and that's when I understood that the senator was open to this. Ray, you weren't here for this, but the woman's name who's about to question Papadopoulos, his last name is Hariharan. So it's either Haraharan or Harahan, or Hararan. I don't know which, so it's just Ms. H. It's easier. There's so many freaky names in this transcript. Ms. H. At any point, did Mr. Sessions tell you to stop contacting Russian officials or any foreign government officials on behalf of the campaign? I don't remember. And like I said, I was never in email communication with the senator. I met him in person twice. We were not having phone calls or anything like that. Did he communicate something like that verbally? I only met him twice. And the second time I met him, we were talking about a completely different topic than Russia. And what were you talking about? About Egypt. So I want to be clear. So you got the impression from him that he was enthusiastic about the idea of the meeting, but he did not verbally say to you at any point, stop contacting Russian officials. Trying to throw Sessions under the bus for all of the legal and completely normal meetings he had with Russians during and after the campaign. No, they scared him into recusing himself from the Mueller investigation. The Democrats may not have the same interests that the Republicans do. Certainly not that I do. I disagree with them on just about everything. Not all, but just about everything. Enough not to vote for them. But you can't say that they're not very smart in their duplicity about the way they treated people during the investigation. Now, they literally scared Sessions into recusing himself. You got to give them credit for that. Didn't help them in the end. Didn't help Sessions either. But they saw an opportunity and they took it. That's another thing about the Democrats. They may be smart short-term, but their long-term proposals don't normally turn out to be pretty good. Very good, excuse me. And if you disagree with that, comment section. Be happy to talk to you about it. Stop contacting Russian officials. I don't remember him ever telling me stop contacting anyone. Okay, And then were you given any additional assignments or deliverables at that meeting by Sessions or anyone else? I don't remember any additional deliverables. I think, like I said, this wasn't an organized campaign. Everybody was there to just kind of jumpstart their own initiatives, and no one was just giving orders to anyone like a 5-year-old. That's very good, Ray. That's very good. I'll read it out loud. It's worth it. Strzok was Agent 13. Agent 13 in the TV show was always in some kind of really horrible and uncomfortable disguise, like a mailbox or just a phone pole. If that may not be true, but something along those lines. Something incredibly difficult and also invisible to anyone looking for him. But he was always cramped or bent or something. It was very, very hilarious interactions between him and Don Adams, Agent 86. And as Ray is discussing, Agent 13 was hidden in trees, mailboxes, ready to jump out, and Lisa Page was the chief's double agent secretary. It wasn't control, it was total chaos. That was the name of the two opposing forces in the show. Control were the good guys, and chaos were the bad guys. You know you're get smart, Ray. Good for you, man. Thanks for bringing that back to my memory. Now we get questioning by Ms. Kim. You said that later that day you met with Mr. Miller. No. I don't know if he was at the same meeting. I don't know if he was at the meeting when I said what I said, but I saw him in person at the meeting. It could have been he could have come in afterwards. I don't know. I just shook his hand, and he said, let's be in touch. Did you have any communication, any substantive communication with Mr. Miller that day? That day, I don't remember. But moving forward, I had some substantial conversations with him. Did he ever follow up with the idea of having the Trump-Putin meeting? I don't remember, but as I said, it is all in email, and I'm happy to share all the emails with you. I love how they keep hammering on the Trump-Putin meeting that never happened. It's like the Trump Tower. They had a letter of intent from years ago, and when push came to shove, they dropped it. Yet that's a sign of something nefarious. Same with a low level, basically know nothing about Russia. Let's say he didn't have knowledge, but nothing about Russia. Staffer named George Papadopoulos throwing out in the blue, I think you should meet with Putin to make himself look better in the campaign hierarchy, and it never happened. No one even gave him a written go-ahead to pursue it. But it's nefarious somehow. Ugh. The damn blinders on these people. During the time that you were interviewing with the FBI, or in fact, any time after the summer of 2016, when you said you stopped communicating with Mr. Misfud, did Mr. Misfud ever reach out to you to try to reestablish communication with you? I'm sorry, repeat that please? Yes. So you stated earlier that as of summer 2016, you stopped communicating with Mr. Misfud. That's what I believe that's when I stopped talking to him, yes. So after you stopped talking to Mr. Misfud, did he ever attempt to reach out to contact you? What I remember is, I don't know the months, okay? So I'm just letting you know what he was trying to accomplish after it seems that I kicked him to the side about the campaign involvement. He introduced me over email to his current lawyer, Stephen Rowe, as somebody that I might be interested in working with or on a project with. Then I had a couple of Skype calls with Stephen Rowe, and then I believe Miss Misfud was actually reaching out to me at the same time the FBI came to my house. So what did you communicate with Mr. Rowe about? So we had discussed, my understanding is that he wanted to open up some sort of office in Washington, D.C. for, he's a lawyer, but he also have a energy consultancy firm. That's my understanding. And he was looking to open up a Washington presence, and he wanted to coordinate with me on that, but nothing ever materialized. Are you aware that in a Daily Caller article, Mr. Rowe has referred to you as a Western intelligence operative. Oh my God. Oh my God. I hope she laughed when she asked that question, because if she said it with a straight face, it just goes to show how humorless these people are. How, after sitting in this meeting, in this hearing, and listening to George Papadopoulos talk about himself, honestly and openly talk about himself, to ask with a straight face if he had ever known that he'd been called a Western intelligence agent. Oh my God, you can't not laugh and ask that question. George says, I wasn't aware of that, but I was aware he wrote a book where he speculated that I could be that. But of course, I don't know this person beyond a couple of emails and phone calls. So of course, he has no substance behind any allegations. Just like all the Trump-Russia allegations. No substance whatsoever. Ms. H. Sorry to jump around. You had said earlier that Jeff Sessions did not push back on you contacting Russian government officials. Did anyone else on the campaign or on the national security team tell you to stop communicating or attempting to communicate with Russian officials? I don't remember if there was direct pushback, but looking back from some emails that have been leaked, again verbatim, it seeks that members of the committee were talking among themselves and saying what Papadopoulos is doing is a bad idea. But I don't know if I was actually copied on any of those emails. Does that make sense? And again, reaching out to Russia, even if it was an idea of the campaign, knocked down by the campaign. Now, Ms. Shen. So if you could turn back to Exhibit 1, I don't know if you still have your copy somewhere, and turn to page 2, and I'm just going to read from the top. Defendant Papadopoulos claimed that his interactions with an overseas professor who defended Papadopoulos understood to have substantial conclusions. That should read, who defendant Papadopoulos understood to have substantial connections to Russian government officials, occurred before defendant Papadopoulos became a foreign policy advisor to the campaign. Defendant Papadopoulos acknowledged that the professor had told him about the Russians possessing dirt on then-candidate Hillary Clinton in the form of thousands of emails, but stated multiple times that he learned that information prior to joining the campaign. And that is where they caught Papadopoulos in a lie. He had, in fact, joined the campaign already. Miss Wood had approached him in Rome, followed him back to London, and then hit him up with the Hillary Clinton emails in the hands of Russians bull. And Papadopoulos either misstated or willfully lied. I understand that he meant to lie, but he certainly wasn't given the benefit of the doubt like all the people interviewed in the mid-year exam Hillary Clinton email investigation were. Certainly not at all. Seems like a pretty minor thing, too. To me, anyway. To the FBI, obviously, it was huge. To Mueller, it was even bigger, I guess, the way he squeezed Papadopoulos. But that's pathetic. In truth and in fact, however, defendant Papadopoulos learned he would be an advisor to the campaign in early March and met the professor on or about March 14, 2016. So we're talking about a week. The professor only took interest in defendant Papadopoulos because of his status with the campaign, or potential status. Again, the professor came at him before Papadopoulos was officially added to the campaign, but there were people who knew Papadopoulos was looking at joining the campaign. So that information could have easily gotten out to the FBI, and then they went after Papadopoulos before he knew what was going on. The professor only took interest in defendant Papadopoulos because of his status with the campaign. And the professor told defendant Papadopoulos about the thousands of emails on or about April 26, 2016, when defendant Papadopoulos had been a foreign policy advisor to the campaign for over a month. Yeah, you're right, Ray. Absolutely right. Just trying to make himself, bigger in the world. And now, let's say this. You mentioned to make himself someone he's not, just to pick up chicks. The dude, as I stated earlier, to quote myself, landed on his feet. Have you seen his wife? And again, she is as smart as a whip, or as sharp as a whip, whatever that phrase is. But she is gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. So George did well. And she defends him up and down. I think you missed it earlier. I said you need to look for the Sean Hannity program that George and his wife were on. Try to find that because, man, that gal can hold her own like nobody else. So, Mr. Papadopoulos, why did you lie to the FBI and claim that your interactions with Professor Misfud occurred before you became a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign? Polisi, I'm going to object to this line of questioning. Shen, what's the objection based upon? Polisi, we're here on a voluntary basis. We have answered all of your questions thus far. It is my advice to him that he not talk specifically about the offense conduct. Are you asserting privilege? I'm not asserting a privilege per se, but would be happy. I would say you could issue a subpoena. We're here on a voluntary basis. It is my advice to him not to talk about the offense conduct. Shen, I would like to mark as Exhibit 2 the government sentencing memorandum for George Papadopoulos, dated August 17, 2018. Man, I can't believe she actually let it go. Normally they fight tooth and nail with the lawyers. Shen, can you please turn to page 4, Mr. Papadopoulos? I believe earlier in this round we were asking about your interviews with the FBI, and I believe that you said that you had brought up to the FBI the professor and your conversation with him. Is that correct? That is what I remember. So if you could take a look at footnote 2 on this page, page 4, in the second paragraph, it reads, to the contrary, the defendant identified the professor only after being prompted by a series of specific questions about when the defendant first learned about Russia's disclosure of information related to the campaign and whether defendant had ever, quote, received any information or anything like that from a Russian government official, unquote. In response, while denying he received any information from a Russian government official that further identified the professor by name, while also falsely claiming he interacted with the professor before I was with Trump, though, close quote. Mr. Papadopoulos, what you just said earlier today during this interview doesn't seem to jive with the information in this footnote. Can you explain this discrepancy? Polisi, I'm still going to object to this line of questioning. I disagree with your characterization of his previous testimony. What's written is written. You read it into the record. Well, he just agreed with my characterization. No, he did not. He did not. He did not agree with your characterization. I asked him if what we talked about earlier was correct. On the record. That is correct. And then I read the paragraph from his sentencing memorandum, and you are not allowing him to respond to that. Correct. I'm not allowing him to respond to that. I like this Polisi gal. She's a firecracker. I know, it's very sexist, but obviously she's a very skilled attorney. But I'm loving the way she's handling Shen. Ms. Kim. Mr. Papadopoulos, you've said to us that you have emails that we are interested in that you will provide to us. Is that correct? Is that right? Yes. Are the current emails in your possession all of the emails, so all of the emails that you sent or received, or have you deleted some emails or communications? I have. My understanding is these are all the emails I have had untampered with the campaign. Do you still have Facebook messages saved, or did those get deleted? First of all, my old Facebook account was never deleted. It was deactivated, and it is reactivated now. So nothing, as far as I understand. I don't think I have actually been on the old Facebook account in a couple of years. I don't think anything has been deleted from that. So you would be willing to provide us the messages from your old Facebook account as well? I have no issue with that. Ms. H. I want to go back quickly to the Capitol Hill Club dinner that was a part of the RNC convention in 2016. A. I don't know when it took place. I just know that's where we ate there at some point. When you sat next to Jeff Sessions, at any point during that dinner, lunch, did you discuss your efforts to communicate with Russian officials or to improve U.S.-Russia relations? Did that come up at any point? My memory of that particular dinner, lunch, whatever it was, that we were focusing almost exclusively on the U.S.-Egypt relationship. And I don't even think Russia came up one time. I don't remember it at all. Russia, Russia, Russia. Then I think it was a day or two later you spoke on an AGC panel with Senator Corker and Representatives Marino and Yoho. What was the subject of that panel? Do you recall? As I recall, it was a panel on America's role in the world. How did you come to speak on that panel? I was invited by, I think, American Jewish Committee. I'm not sure how that invite got to me exactly, but I think they were hosting the panel, I think. Is it fair to say that you were invited because of your role as a foreign policy advisor on the campaign? I presume so, yes. And you had, actually, before I do that, did the campaign have to approve of that, of you speaking on that panel? Or is it you were just invited and you accepted it? Or did you let them know those types of? I can't remember exactly what the setup was, but I know that's the day I met Rick Dearborn, Bo Denisick, and John Mashburn. Again with the last names. As part of your foreign policy duties for the campaign, I know you said you focused mostly on Middle East and parts of Europe. Were you at any point consulted on any matters related to Ukraine? Well, Hillary certainly was. I don't have any memory of that, no. So that wasn't something, let's say, that came up in any conversation with Paul Manafort or Mike Flynn or Jeff Sessions or anybody like that? As far as I remember, absolutely not. Ms. Shen. Last month, you did an interview with George Stephanopoulos. Yes. And during that interview, you stated that when you were interviewing at the FBI, you, quote, understood that there was an incipient investigation into Russian interference for the 2016 election. And you also stated, quote, I found had myself pinned between the Department of Justice and the sitting president and have probing questions that I thought might incriminate the sitting president, end quote. Do you generally recall saying that? During the interview with George? Yes. Yeah. And what? Why did you think that you might incriminate the president? I don't have a comment on that, actually. Well, it sounds pretty serious. Why wouldn't you? I guess I'll speak for myself, not the president, because I don't know the president, and he doesn't know me. So I thought that potentially what Miss Flood told me was something criminal, and that I was involved in potentially something criminal. Not that the president himself, but because he was on a campaign, and I was on his campaign, it might have infected him indirectly. And I think that's what I was talking to George about. But in terms of me incriminating the president, I don't know him, he doesn't know me, and certainly he will have nothing to do with Joseph Misfud and what he told me so. So you never thought that the president might have been committing a crime? In my opinion, no. Ms. Kim, did you attend the inauguration? I was in Washington for the inauguration. I attended a couple of parties there. Which parties did you attend? What the hell does that have to do with anything? I attended a party, I think it was the Archdiocese of New York, with hosting some award ceremony for Reince Priebus and George Gikios, or is it Gikios? I have no idea, was the head of events for the Trump campaign, and I think that's the only party I attended. Did you attend any kind of watching parties, celebrations, inauguration balls? I think the only festivity I attended was that, and there was either a pre-party to that or an after-party to that. I can't remember exactly which parties I attended during the inauguration. Where were you on the night of the election? I don't remember. You don't remember where you watched the election returns? I don't remember what TV I was watching it on or what city. I think I might have been in Chicago. I was watching on TV. I just don't know exactly where in the world I was at that time because I was traveling a lot at that time. I see. What was your reaction to the victory? Ecstatic. Did you reach out to anyone on the Trump campaign that day? That particular day? Like, I think Steve Bannon, just to say we did it or something like that. I can't. Like I said, I could provide all these emails. I just don't know. I really can't remember exactly what I did on that specific day. What news reports, and I think as you discussed earlier, you forwarded a proposal for a strategic alliance from the Greek defense minister to Mr. Bannon and Mr. Flynn. How did the Greek defense minister reach out to you about the proposal? Let me think. I was a well-known person in that industry, especially in that part of the world. And I believe during my initial meeting with him in May 2016, he was really interested in having Greece become the new frontier for NATO in the Mediterranean, which is also, there's this misunderstanding that I was talking with some sort of pro-Russian defense minister, which in my opinion, I think he could be the best friend of the U.S. in the southeast Mediterranean, but that's another topic. So we were talking about it there, just floating ideas. Hey, this might be something interesting. This was May, though, before any election. Just a theory at that point. And then I think I was in Greece in December 2016. And either I met with him or one of his staff, and they said, this is what we want to do. What do you think? And I passed the message along. That's how I think it happened. Why did you send the proposal to Michael Flynn? Steve Bannon sent it to Michael Flynn. You sent it to Steve Bannon, and then he forwarded it to Michael Flynn. Exactly. Why did you send it to Steve Bannon? Well, I thought a deal like that is great for U.S. business and interest. So it is a NATO ally, it is a huge deal, and it advances the national cause. I mean, that's how I saw it. I didn't see any downside to American companies taking exclusive rights to all of Greece's natural reserves. I thought that was a good deal for us. That's why I passed it along. And you said that Flynn responded positively to he responded something along the lines of, this is very interesting, let's look into it. Did you ever connect again about it in person? I have never met Michael Flynn in person in my life. Did you follow up the proposal with anyone else on the Trump transition team? As far as I remember, it was Steve Bannon. He forwarded it. Then I think the higher-ups took care of whatever they were doing or didn't do. Did you have any other communication with foreign government officials during the transition? I met the president of Cyprus and the Jordanian foreign minister. And I think actually, now that you refresh my memory, I think I sent a note, not to Flynn, but maybe to Flynn's assistant about those meetings I was having. So I don't know if it was directly to Flynn, so I'm glad you actually asked that question just to refresh my memory. So I believe I met the Cypriot president, who was also interested in ExxonMobil and some other companies coming in and doing business there. And I just passed along messages, I think, to Flynn's assistant, which I thought was something very good for our country. And then I met the Jordanian foreign minister while I was in Cyprus through a connection I had in Cyprus. And I can't remember if I sent anything about him, but I probably did to Flynn's assistant. All right, you're on fire tonight, sir. You're in total fire. Did you have any meetings with the Emiratis during the transition? Not that I recall, no. Any meetings with Egyptian officials during the transition? I can't remember, but it's possible because I had a very close network with them, but I can't remember about Egypt in particular. Sure. What about Saudi officials? During the transition or throughout the campaign? I will take any time during the campaign, during the transition, after the... Well, this is interesting because it goes back to Mifsud. Mifsud had introduced me to, I believe he's a Saudi national. I believe he's also a fellow at Harvard called Nawaf Obaid. I think that's his name. It's Nawaf Obaid. And he met in London, so it was around the time I still had some interactions with Mifsud, and he basically was talking to me about what the Saudis thought of Trump at the time, and that he was very connected to Saudi, these kinds of things. I met him one time, and I think that was the only Saudi person I ever met on the campaign or the transition. Thank you. Did you meet with any Qataris? I don't believe so, no. Did you meet with any foreign government officials affiliated with Israel during the transition? During the transition or during the campaign? During the transition. I can't remember during the transition, but I met with many Israeli officials while I was on the campaign. Did you meet with any foreign officials on the day of the inauguration? Actually, wait, hold on. I'm glad you... So, during the inauguration, I met with an Israeli person. He was a political leader named Yossi Dagan, who was introduced to me by this person, David Ivory, who introduced me to this important Charles Tawil that I mentioned earlier with the strange behavior of his. So, just to be clear, during the inauguration, or the day before, around then, I met with Yossi Dagan and his team just to talk about settlements and stuff like that. And then there was an article in the Jerusalem Post about it, but I don't remember meeting with others, really, officials during the transition, but I met with others during the campaign, if that makes sense. Excuse me. That does make sense. Were you involved in any phrasing for the inauguration? I don't think so, no. Did you have any discussions about your potential employment in the Trump administration during the transition period or during the inauguration? Like specifically during the inauguration swearing in? I mean, that's kind of a weird question. Or weird time frame, I guess I'm saying. George, I'm sure I was talking to people to get a job. I just can't remember exactly who or what I was doing. But I was in touch with Rob Whitmore, some people who were connected to Reince Priebus, this guy, Father Alex Carlotsos. Killing me, Smalls, in New York. So it was, that's really, I mean, certainly, I wanted a job, and I was trying to talk to people who could get me a job. Do you remember what types of positions you were in consideration for? That I was under consideration for or I wanted, because I don't know if I was under consideration. It's, I believe, some sort of Undersecretary of Energy, something along those lines. I think the New York Times had the exact position I might have been under for. I just can't remember the exact titles, or I don't know if those were officials, or if that was just my aspiration. I don't remember that. Ms. H. Does the name Peter Smith ever come up either with Michael Flynn or with other folks on the campaign? Does that sound familiar? I don't think I've ever heard of the name Peter Smith in my life. That ends the hour. Let's go off the record. It's 3:19 p.m. Okay, so I'm behind, but we're going to catch up a little bit here. I'm going to blow through the break. Meadows. Mr. Papadopoulos, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and go back on. And I show the time is 3:25. Yes, sir. So I want to follow up on one item from the previous hour where you had talked about Mr. Twill. Obviously, we're back on the Republican side now. I guess you had not heard from him about the $10,000. And then all of a sudden you get an email, I assume an email out of the blue, saying he wants his $10,000 back. Is that correct? My memory of the past year and any interactions I had with this individual, I'm more than happy to share his emails with the committee, was that he would reach out to me indirectly through contacts of mine and ask, how is George doing? What's his news? Even though I was all over the global media at that time. And I don't remember him ever asking for his money back, even though I had offered to give him his money back shortly after I left him in wherever I left him. And going back into my records, I just looked at my email, and we can provide this to you. I think 2 days after I was sentenced, I think so, September 9th of last month, he sends me an email. Oh yeah, okay, this interview's in October. So September 9th of last month, he sends me an email. He says, not only am I thinking about suing you, but I want my money, and let's act like we never met. Something along those lines. And what was your response to him, if you can share that? Witness confers with counsel. I didn't respond to him, but my counsel reached out to the special prosecutors and had a discussion with him about it. So there's been no subsequent follow-up from him. No. My impression of that is that he was trying to recover evidence, not money of some nature, because he had over a year to ask for it, or he could have simply picked it up after I left him. And I was in Greece, and I told him to come take his money back last year. But all of a sudden now, after I'm sentenced, he wants this particular money back, so I find it very suspicious. Okay? And I could also talk about, I believe, this links into the nature of my arrest. I always questioned if it was a normal arrest. When you lie to the FBI, to be stopped at an airport by the FBI, taken to a closed room, and essentially, discover that you're under arrest in such a dramatic fashion for what my understanding is a relatively unharmful crime of lying to the FBI. And again, from the word go, Papadopoulos was being set up as a patsy and to be squeezed by the Mueller team. And I'll repeat, anyone who thinks Mueller was a good guy just because he came to the right conclusion has not paid any attention to what he's done since the investigation first got kicked off, when he consumed Crossfire Hurricane into the special counsel investigation. There's just no possible way to put it other than he rolled over people with impunity and did whatever he wanted to them in order to get the answers that he felt he deserved, that he wanted, whether or not that was the truth, in my opinion. Papadopoulos continues, my memory of the arrest is that they were searching for this money in my bag, and when they couldn't find this money, there seemed to be some sort of haste to figure out what to do with me. And that's why, Meadows, help me understand which airport, where were we? Exactly. I know it's vivid to you, but it's absolutely. That's why I'm here to let you know exactly what happened. I was flying, I believe, from Athens to Munich in Germany, and I was flying back to Chicago, but I had a connection in Dulles. And I noticed the FBI agents waiting for me on the shuttle train that you're on as you're coming back to the United States. And I just noticed two people with suits and ties while everyone else was in sweatpants and exhausted from our transatlantic flight. Important traveling note, dress in loose clothing. Sitting in a cramped seat on a long flight on those tiny little planes, even though they could be big wide bodies, when you're in coach, you're squeezed in as like sardines. Do not wear tight clothes. Those seats cut off your circulation, and while you're flying, your blood pools, and you could develop a chance to develop blood clots in your legs. Keeping loose clothing on reduces the chance of those clots forming and helps you feel more refreshed during the flight because your blood's circulating properly. Yes, Ray, Stalin was just like that. Just like that. You should have seen the bit earlier we were talking about when he was, one time he was leaving the States after the FBI had first talked to him. Three armed guys, and by armed I mean wearing full Kevlar outfits and carrying at least semi-automatic rifles, if not assault rifles. They approached him and basically interrogated him right there at the door to the airplane about where he was going and most specifically if he was coming back. They were very insistent about knowing if he was coming back or not. A guy who was not a flight risk, who did not have a lot of luggage with him. They would have known that. Yeah, they were on his neck. Oh my God. They're just standing on his neck the whole time. And I was texting my girlfriend at the time, letting her know that I think there are two FBI agents who are going to stop me. And I was right, they were FBI agents. I'm about to put my passport in the kiosk to get my reentry approval, and the FBI agent shows me his badge and says, follow us. Here's that redaction again. There is someone associated with the FBI, an FBI agent, whose name has been redacted twice now. So I have to understand that maybe he's under investigation by the IG or something like that. We'll have to see. And I go to a room where I see Curtis Heidi and blank, redacted, excuse me, the two agents who had originally interviewed me in Chicago. And it looked like they were searching through my bag in a very violent manner to look what I believe was the money. And then I was told I was under arrest. I don't remember why I was under arrest exactly. I was taken to a detention center in Alexandria. As far as I remember, it was Alexandria, and it was only the next day that I figured out that I was being charged for lying to the FBI and obstruction of justice in front of the magistrate. So everything was done in a very... I had never been arrested before. I didn't know that was a normal procedure. But reading certain articles about my arrest in Politico and other newspapers, it seems like there was some sort of rush to arrest me and Meadows. So let me get this straight. You fly from Munich on your way back to Chicago. You land in Dulles. You're making a connection in Dulles. Is that correct? That's correct. You're on the shuttle going from one terminal to the other, I would assume. Something like that. One of the elevated buses. Is that, yeah, the shuttle going to the security to show my passport and Meadows. For passport control? Passport control, exactly. So you don't actually re-enter? No. And they arrest you prior to re-entering the United States? Technically, I was on U.S. soil, but maybe I had not given the agents my passport to re-enter the country. And what you're saying is, to your recollection, You don't recall why you were being arrested. To my recollection, I didn't. Meadows. So you didn't say, why are you arresting me? Papadopoulos. The only thing I remember was something along the lines of, and I can't remember if it was after I had the handcuffs on me, that they told me, this is what happens when you don't tell us everything about your Russia contacts. Man. Compare that to the mid-year exam. Oh my God. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And like I said earlier, it looks like it was not just the top of the FBI that was, let's just say, not properly doing their job, or not being fair about how they were doing their job, I think is a better way to put it. Obviously, they had it in for George from the start, but they let all of the mid-year exam interviewees go with immunity. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Screw Robert Mueller. Screw his people. But I don't remember any formal Papadopoulos. But I don't remember any formal charges or them telling me you are under arrest for X, Y, or Z. That I don't remember at all. They told you, I guess they gave you your Miranda rights? I don't remember that. I don't remember that. I'm sure there might be a video or a transcript of what was going on. You have to understand, I had just come off a transatlantic flight. Right. I was groggy. I was just trying to get home and sleep. And I ended up sleeping in a prison cell. And see right there, there's another thing. He lied to the FBI. And they threw him in jail right off of a flight. He had a lawyer. They could have told his lawyer, George is under arrest. You need to bring him in. These kind of strong-arm tactics are pure Stasi. Like this when they arrested Roger Stone. According to them, he lied to a House committee. I believe it was the House committee, not the Senate. And they surrounded his house with armed agents. They even put boats in the water, in the canal, behind his house with armed people on them, just to make sure he didn't shoot out and make a swim for it. For lying to Congress. Screw Robert Mueller. And you said they were searching your bags prior to them arresting you. That's, as I was observing him, yes, that's what it looked like. Who was searching your bags? It looked like it was Curtis Heide, agent. It was FBI agents, not Customs. I'm sorry, that was let me back up. Mr. Summers says, and they were searching your bags prior to them arresting you. That's, as I was observing them, yes, that's what it looked like. Summers, who was searching your bags? Papadopoulos. It looked like Curtis Heide, agent Summers. It was FBI agents, not Customs. Meadows. So it was not Customs. Papadopoulos. No. It was FBI. Meadows. So prior to going through Customs, they take your bags and the FBI searches your bags. Yes. That's my briefcase. I had a briefcase on me. Your briefcase. Yes, sir. So that's your testimony. So they basically take your briefcase and they start searching it. Did they ask you permission to search it? My memory is that they put me in a room at the airport. They did not ask me for any permission whatsoever, and then they began to search through my briefcase in a very, quite violent manner. Meadows. By violent, what do you mean? Just ripping it? Just opening it like that, putting their hands and just digging around. I just didn't understand what was going on. Ray, you missed it earlier. Papadopoulos was basically approached by some shady Israeli guy and told he wanted to have Papadopoulos help him in some venture, and he was, as I remember, not very clear about what it was supposed to be exactly. Papadopoulos meets him in Israel after leaving. The guy flies him from Greece to Israel. Papadopoulos is on vacation in Greece, and the guy said, I'll meet you in Greece, and then I'll fly you to Israel, which he did. Papadopoulos meets him in a room, and the guy hands him $10,000 US in cash. And they have done no kind of business together yet. Papadopoulos takes the money, flies to Greece, almost gets caught with it, which, and you know, getting caught with a large amount of cash on an international flight is very, very difficult to get out of. And Papadopoulos realizes maybe this money's marked. Maybe there's something really bad going on here. And so he has his lawyers put it in a safe place in Greece. And you heard me reading about that money just a little bit ago, how the guy wanted it back all of a sudden after Papadopoulos was sentenced. And so that's the flight that George was coming back from, come to the U.S. from. And they were waiting for him, and it looks like they were specifically waiting for him to catch him with that 10 grand in most likely marked bills to set him up as an Israeli foreign agent, so they could really put the screws to him. As it turned out, all they had was lying to the FBI and obstruction of justice. And I think the obstruction of justice was a real ticky-tack charge, just meant to squeeze him in further. And for all that effort, he served 12 days in jail. Way to go, Mueller. And they didn't indicate Meadows, and they didn't indicate what they were looking for. Papadopoulos, I don't remember them indicating anything, no. And I don't remember them actually formally, I guess, looking through my bag until I can't remember, after we went in a car or to another facility where I was processed. It was very strange. So did they show you a warrant to search those things? I didn't. Did they have a warrant to search your... I don't remember any warrant. In fact, the whole situation was it seemed very rushed and very chaotic. So you're telling me that they searched your personal property without a warrant prior to your coming through customs? That's what I remember. Yes, sir. Did you say earlier some were dressed in tactical attire? That was, I think that Meadows. I think that was the tactical. Wasn't that in Chicago? Papadopoulos. That was at O'Hare Airport in Chicago as I was going on my plane to Europe. And this is as I'm being arrested. Is it the same trip? The round trip, yeah. So you have tactical people that meet you when you're leaving from Chicago O'Hare. And then you have agents that are meeting you when you come back. At Dulles, yeah. So let me switch back to your arrest. At what point did you start to believe that you were under FBI investigation? I mean, because, from being arrested in Dulles, walk me backwards. At what point did you start to believe that you were being investigated by the FBI? Is that January of 2017? When is it? As far as I remember, I was never formally told I was under investigation until I assumed when I had handcuffs on me I was in trouble then. But I don't remember the FBI ever telling me after any interview I had with them leading up to the arrest that there's an investigation into you or anything like that. So you voluntarily spoke to FBI agents multiple times thinking that you were helping them out with an investigation and that you were not the subject of that investigation. Is that correct? That was my impression until they told me that. You're the center of this. But I thought the center of this meant because I told them this information about Misswood, not that I'm a target. Does that make sense? I thought maybe because I provided such critical Meadows, that you were central to the investigation, not the target of the investigation. Exactly, sir. That was my impression. That I helped my country, and that's why I was such a critical figure, not that I was the central target itself. Yeah. Yeah, 10 grand staring you in the face. You're gonna take it just out of being polite, if anything else. But let's give it up for George. He realized pretty quickly what was going on, and he ditched that money as soon as he could. Should have ditched it sooner because he almost got caught with it coming through customs in Greece. In fact, he mentions that he had never seen dogs sniffing for cash before coming through that airport, which he had done 20 times or so. But that one time, there were dogs sniffing for cash, but they missed his. So he dodged a bullet right there. So that just proves that they were looking for that money all along. That Tawil guy from Israel, I'm sure he that was all coordinated ahead of time, and he made a phone call as soon as George left the room, if not just spoken to a microphone because the room was wired, and said he took the cash, and that set the ball in motion, or wheels in motion. Sorry, I mixed up my metaphors there. Meadows. So let me take you back to July of 2016. So this is prior to the election. Yes, sir. Were you, to the best of your knowledge, under investigation in July of 2016? Did you have any reason to believe that you were under FBI investigation? To the best of my recollection, absolutely not. I would have no idea by July 2016. So let me take you to October of 2016. Any reason to believe that you were under an FBI investigation in October of 2016? An investigation, sir? I have no recollection of ever being under the impression that I had the FBI targeting me for any reason, but I did have very strange encounters in July, October, and September. Strange encounters with other people? With other people, yes. Right. But to the best of your knowledge, you never had a conversation, knowingly had a conversation with an FBI agent in July, August, September, October, or November of 2016. Is that correct? That's correct. So when you pushed back with Stephen Halpern and you said, listen, and that's all remember, this is Stephen right here, lower left, George in the middle, and that douche, oh gosh, I forgot his name now, the Australian High Counsel to the UK, the Australian ambassador. I just had it and lost it. Anyway, that's this guy up here, upper left, the people that did all they could to help George along, being a strong, upright citizen. Downer, that's it, Alexander Downer. Thank you. Whoever thought that. I picked up on your thoughts. So when you pushed back with Stephen Halpern and you said, listen, this is, I'm not going to do that, and colluding with the Russians would not be something that I would do. It would be against the law. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You had no knowledge of being under an investigation at that particular time. Is that correct? So that's absolutely correct. And if I had even a scintilla of proof or believed that Stephen Halpern was an FBI agent, there's no way I would have been going and talking to him. I just wouldn't. I don't think I would. I don't think anybody would be running into some sort of operation against themselves. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most aggressive in terms of your pushback, what number would you categorize your pushback from Mr. Halpern when he was asking you about your involvement with Russia? 10. Meadows, it's a 10. Papadopoulos, yeah. So what you're telling me is that colluding with the Russians was the last thing on anybody's mind at that particular point. Last thing on my mind, certainly. I can only speak for myself. All right. Now, Mr. Summers. What was Mr. Halpern's response when you said, hey, when you pushed back, either visibly or orally? I remember visibly he was very agitated, angry, irritated, whatever you want to call it. I just remember him looking at me like, I almost got you, but you didn't tell me what I wanted to tell you, what I wanted you to tell me kind of look. And I just looked at him and was curious as to what was going on actually, because as it's very clear now, I had nothing to do with collusion. Even the judge presiding over my sentencing said the same thing essentially. So I was very confused then, and even more confused now as to how I found myself in a Russia conspiracy. Does that kind of end the conversation when you push back? I mean, how much more conversation did you have? Yeah, I believe the conversation ended very quickly after I pushed back. You said your goodbyes and went your separate ways. That's how I remember it, yes. And you had no further contact with Halpern or not after that. Basically to arrange payment, that's how I remember it afterwards, and to submit my paper to him. Halpern had contracted Papadopoulos, in case you don't remember, to do a paper on energy in, I believe, just the Middle East. Let's just say the Middle East energy policy, and offered him $3,000 and a flight to London to provide the paper, which Papadopoulos took him up on, and then Halpern blindsides him with this whole, did you collude? Did you do you have anything to do with hacking? What do you know about hacking emails? Totally trying to rope Papadopoulos into some kind of trap. There's another individual, correct me if I mispronounce his name, but I think he came up a little bit in the previous hour, but I don't think we talked about him in depth. Sergei Milian? Papadopoulos. I guess his name is Sergei Millian, but I guess he has other aliases too. When did you first come into contact with him? Sergei Millian reached out to me out of the blue on LinkedIn around sometime in late July 2016. I can't remember exactly how he presented himself, but he basically stated that he's an American of Belarusian origin who worked for Trump or his organization, and he could be helpful in understanding the U.S.-Russia relationship, and he might be a good person to get to know. So I thought this was probably one of Trump's people, and he's reaching out to me. That's a good sign. I have the message somewhere. I could always present it to the committee here. And then we met shortly after that in New York. And what did you discuss in that New York meeting? I will say I don't remember too much, except that he was very interested. He was acting like he was very pro-Trump, that he wanted to arrange me to meet with certain Russian-American leaders, especially in the church, and to help get the Russian-American vote out for Trump. The Russian vote out for Trump. I love it. I love it. I know that's a slip, but it's a funny slip. I wonder if there was a little laugh there. Probably not. And that he was a businessman of some sort, that he was very excited for Trump, something like that. And that he knew Michael Cohen. That's what I remember. But I felt that actually he might be recording my conversation with him, too. By this time, after the Halper meeting, Ray, George had become pretty well convinced that people were trying to record him whenever they could. Actually, before that, Downer presented his phone and held it in front of George, near as we can tell by the text of the transcript, and was obviously recording him with it the entire time. Yet there's no transcript of that recording. At least not that's been presented at George's trial. Q. I mean, you kind of indicated that he knew Trump or knew Michael Cohen. Did he explain why he was reaching out to you? That's exactly the point. I never really caught that. I kept asking him. I remember I asked him one time, have you reached out to anyone else on the Foreign Policy Committee? He said no. It just struck me as strange that he wanted to really befriend me or target me, I guess, and I have my suspicions that he was targeting me. And then after you said you had a meeting with him in New York. Was there contact after that meeting in New York? Yes. And what did that consist of? Mostly talking about the potential that if I had formally left the campaign, which I had considered around certain months, that we would engage in some legitimate business that he might have. And then I made it clear to him that any business that we would be talking about would be completely illegal. I wouldn't be... It's not how he put it earlier. The way he put it earlier was that it would have to be legal, it'd have to be above board, and George would have to be out of the campaign. We couldn't be doing both at the same time. And I think he says that right here. George continues, I wouldn't be part of the Trump campaign organization or have absolutely nothing to do with Trump himself if I'm going to work with you or anybody else, by the way. And then he decided to present some sort of ambiguous business proposal to me. One day in October or November in Chicago, where I felt that he was wearing a wire or he was setting me up for something about this proposal that he was talking about. He came to Chicago. We met at Trump Tower. He was very nervous, and he started telling me, yet this deal that I think is for $30,000 a month, it's a PR gig for a contact of mine in Russia. Contact of his? His. Something I never really understood what this was. But you have to understand, George, that if we do this, you'll still have to work for Trump. And he was looking at me with his eyes really bogged out, really very nervous. And I just looked at him like this guy is on an operation against me right now, trying to set me up for something. And I flatly told him, as far as I remember, no, I'm not taking this offer because it's illegal, what you're talking about. At least I thought it was illegal. All right, now I understand. Okay. And we were supposed then to meet later that night, and he just told me, I'm feeling sick, I'm going back to New York tonight. So very strange character, very strange person. What's even more strange was during the inauguration, where I met him again, and it was my understanding that he had been meeting with Senator McCain and some other members of Congress with an associate of his, Aziz Chokri, who I presented his name to. And of course, I believe it was Sergei Millian who was the guy who passed out the Steele dossier after it was received by the McCain office. You can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but that's the context that I'm getting. I couldn't remember his name before, but George had mentioned how someone who he knew, he had come up in the papers as being the source of the Steele dossier, and I'm pretty sure he meant Sergei. George continues, and he said, let's meet up. We meet at the Russia House here in Washington for a couple drinks. And I meet this individual named Aziz, who was sitting next to him, and he made a remark to me that never left my mind in front of Sergei, and said that, oh, you know, Sergei is working for the FBI, something like that. Q, and you're saying Sergei was sitting there at the time. Sergei was sitting there. Meadows. So he said Sergei was working for the FBI? He certainly said something along those lines, yes, where it left the impression on me that Sergei was not who he seemed to be. Biggs. I'm sorry. You don't know who I am. Andy Biggs from Arizona. I just want to clarify for the record, when you said he there about 3 different times. Aziz. You're talking Millian that Aziz is working for? No, Aziz. Oh, that Aziz. Yes, Aziz Chokri at this dinner, where we're doing, whatever we were doing, having drinks, made some reference to Sergei's connection to the FBI, and I didn't understand what that was. If it was a joke, it could be a joke, I don't know. It's not my job to investigate or to understand if that was a joke or if it was a serious thing. I have just never heard of a joke like that. And then a couple days later, before I'm interviewed by the FBI, he comes out on the front page, meaning Sergei Millian, as the source of the Steele dossier. Thank you. Thank you. Conclusion drawn and confirmed. Now, is all this connected? Is he just a shady businessman? Was he working for somebody else when he was targeting me? Is Aziz making a joke, or is he serious about Sergei working with the FBI or associated with the FBI? I don't know. I'm just repeating what I was told to this committee. So did you, in all of those connections that you had, can you recall when you first had the contact with Sergei in, you said July. Did you say July of 2016? Thank you, Ray. Thank you. He reached out in July of 2016 via LinkedIn. Do you know when in July of 2016, what the date was? I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was around July 22nd. And do you recall the date that you actually met with him? I'm not even 100% sure of exactly the day in July. I could always go back in my records and provide that. That would be helpful. Those dates would be helpful, but when did you meet with him, in July or in August? He reached out certainly in July of 2016, and we might have met beginning of August at some point. Meadows. Okay. Now, did you connect Boris Papadopoulos face to face? Meadows interrupted him. So Papadopoulos was basically saying, we might have met in the beginning of August at some point face to face. Then Meadows says, okay, now did you connect Boris? I think it's Boris Epstein to Millian. Papadopoulos. I'm sorry, it's Epstein. Papadopoulos. I attempted to set up a meeting between both of them, but I don't think they ever met. Maybe they met on their own, but I didn't achieve. Meadows. So you weren't successful. You tried to do that, but you weren't successful. Yeah. That's my understanding. I don't think they ever met through me at any time. So following up on my colleague's questions here, when you talked to the special prosecutor about Sergei, tell me how those questions went with the special prosecutor. What did they want to know? So as far as I remember, that was, I guess, the excuse to get me to talk to them. You're a friend in New York, and you know who we're talking about. Meadows. I'm talking about the special prosecutor, though. Oh, not the FBI. Papadopoulos, not the FBI. Meadows. I'm talking about the special prosecutor. Yes, I don't remember too much communication about Sergei with the special counsel, actually. So you don't recall any specific line of questioning that they would have asked you about him? I remember the FBI's line of questioning, but I don't remember the prosecutors actually really digging in to Sergei Millian. Okay, so what did the FBI ask you about? If he was cultivating me or something along those lines. Cultivating you for Russia? I don't know. I just kind of laughed it off, I think. When did the FBI ask you that? During my first interview. But it's also strange because according to the sentencing memorandum, they state explicitly to me that that was just a ruse to get me to talk to them, that they weren't really interested in talking about Sergei. So it goes from, is he cultivating you? We really don't want to talk about this guy. That's according to the public transcript that my former lawyers released to the judge, and I think that's public now, so it's odd. That's, yeah. Meadows. Okay, I yield back. I'll continue with Mr. Summers. And then just circling back to this conversation with Aziz. So he says Sergei is working for the FBI or something to that effect. Does the conversation continue after that? Does Sergei get defensive? What happens? I think Sergei was a little shocked. He did one of these where he puts his eyes up like that. And then I was very cautious about my interactions with them. And then I think we went out afterwards to another place. And then Sergei had a hotel room, and we went to get some food, I think, in his hotel room, and they left. And I remember in his hotel room, I was moving his laptop away because I felt that he might have been recording me or something along those lines. I was very paranoid at that point, I remember. And I think that was the last time I ever saw Sergei face-to-face. Any contact with him after? Not face-to-face after? He had been reaching out a lot from discussing anything from my wife's looks to his own legal battles. Okay, that's just inappropriate to talk about another guy's wife like that. To his own legal battles he was fighting about with defamation lawsuits he was interested in. I don't think I was ever really responding to him after the FBI came to my house. Is this over a course of time, or were there specific times when he reached out to you? I think after the FBI came to my house, he was reaching out quite a lot. And I can't really remember if I was responding to him or I was just dismissing him, but he was definitely reaching out a lot. Was that publicly recorded? I'm sorry, that the FBI came to your house in January? Yes. Do you mean if it's reported now? No. At the time? No, I don't think so. I'm just trying to see. No, I don't think so. That Sergei... And, okay, so he interrupted him. The question is, I'm just trying to see that Sergei could have read in the news that, hey, he was picked up by the FBI or he came in and talked to the FBI. No, I don't think anything about me was public until my name was released in October. But around that same time, he started reaching out to you again. He was reaching out a lot after the FBI came into my life. So did you ever discuss with Sergei the dossier? You know, obviously it's reported with. Did you discuss the dossier or what's now become known as the dossier with Sergei? I have absolutely no recollection of ever talking about anything even close to resembling what has been reported in this apparent dossier. I don't have any memory whatsoever of talking about anything like that. Okay, did he mention it? I know you didn't. You didn't. That's what I mean. I don't remember. So what you're saying is you don't recall any mention of it. No, that's something that would have left a mark in any memory if the candidate had a P-tape, if that's what these allegations are. I mean, I don't recall ever hearing anything like that. So I'm going to switch gears back to Chicago real quick. Yes. Chicago, you have FBI agents there. They're interviewing you. Is that correct? Is that where Mr. Kleinsmith was there with you as well? That was my third interaction with him, yes, in February of 2017, I believe. So your third interaction, Mr. Kleinsmith is there. Why the addition of Mr. Kleinsmith? I simply thought it was because I had counsel, and that was the process that then counsel comes and talks with you. I didn't know, again verbatim, who Mr. Kleinsmith was, of course, until much later on. So was Mr. Kleinsmith an active participant in that interview? He was leading the discussion as far as I remember. So are you aware that there has been reports of him having very anti-Trump comments, quote, vive la résistance, end quote, etc.? Are you aware that that's the same gentleman? Now I'm aware, yes. And so you had two FBI agents, and you had Mr. Kleinsmith, and Mr. Kleinsmith was leading that third Papadopoulos. There was a big group. I don't know who was a lawyer from the DOJ. I don't know who was an FBI agent, but he was part of a big delegation. And so if he was directing that, what was the core of that questioning at that particular point? As I remember, his particular questioning, had really nothing to do with Joseph Misfud, who I had just notified the FBI about a couple days ago from that point. It was more, do you remember talking to a Western diplomat in a bar? He didn't give the name. And two, do you remember talking about emails with anyone on the campaign? That's what I remember Kevin talking to me about, which I just found is very odd, considering that I thought the topic should have been a Russian agent named Joseph Mifsud. Mifsud. I'll never get it right, folks. Please forgive me. Yell at me in the comments section all you want. I apologize. I just can't get this guy's name right. Meadows. All right. It does sound like a Who's on First skit, Ray. You're exactly correct. It's not a baseball team. It's that with the wickets and the cricket. Yeah, cricket. It's like all of the members of the entire cricket division playoffs. All of them. I don't know if cricket has divisions. Actually, it's the best word I could come with at the time. All right, Mr. Meadows. All right, and so in that direction, as they were directing the conversation, when you told them that you had not communicated with anybody in the campaign about the emails, what was their response? I can't remember if it was after I told them that I thought Mifsud was a BSing, or if it was after I told them I don't remember meeting this random diplomat that they were alluding to, that they got up, stormed out, and left in a very aggressive manner. And Kevin was very aggressive in his exit. That's how I remember it. But that seemed to be, they all got up and left. I'm sorry, Mr. Baker. They all got up and left? Papadopoulos. Yes, basically, you didn't tell us what we hoped you were going to tell us. And that's basically what the million-dollar question has always been. And I guess, who did I tell in the campaign about this? And Meadows. And your testimony here today is no one. Is that correct? My testimony today is I have absolutely no recollection of talking about emails, Hillary Clinton's, with anyone on the Trump campaign. And I have said as much to the FBI and to the special counsel. So I'm going to ask my very last question, and I'll refer it back to my colleagues. What do you want the American people to know about George Papadopoulos that is very different than what has been reported? Papadopoulos. George Papadopoulos has no Russian connection whatsoever, never did. He found himself mired in a Russia conspiracy, which makes no sense to him, and I assume probably everyone in this room, and probably half the American public. I had many contacts with Western intelligence and Western diplomats. Some might have been masquerading as something they were not, like I assume Joseph Mifsud was, if his lawyer is to be believed. Stephen Halper, Alexander Downer. And I just really want to get to the bottom of why I was targeted by these very seasoned diplomats and intelligence officials and what I was used for. And I think everybody really wants to figure that out, because I think figuring that out will unlock many mysteries in this entire investigation. And that's why I think that's really what I'm at the core of, not the core of a Russia conspiracy, and that's what I truly believe. Mr. Meadows, thank you for your testimony. I'll yield back. Papadopoulos, thank you very much. Summers, if I could just jump around a few things, just notes that I have written. Excuse me a moment. So there you have it. And this, I believe the IG is looking into some of the FBI's behavior during Crossfire Hurricane, which is what happened before Papadopoulos was arrested by a special counsel. I believe special counsel took over Crossfire Hurricane in May of 2016. 2017. Yeah, May of 2017. Papadopoulos was arrested that September. And that's why that FBI's agent name is redacted, I'm sure, because he's involved in this IG investigation. But I believe it was not Jim Jordan. Lindsey Graham came out yesterday and said something very forceful about there being an investigation into how this Mueller thing was run. Because some really, at least honest people. George strikes me as a very honest guy. Self-promoting, sure, but we all were at that age. Michael Flynn, if you can impeach his character to any effect with me, I will vote for you in any election, and I will probably light a votive candle in your honor every night. There's nothing you can say to me about Michael Flynn that could change my mind. These are honorable people. And they were steamrolled by Mueller with the pure intent of screwing Donald Trump to the wall. This is just disgusting. I don't know when Papadopoulos is going to get his pardon, but he's damn well getting a pardon. All right, questions by Mr. Summers. 1. The emails from Misfud. Did he say, hey, these emails exist, or did he offer to provide them to you? My understanding and memory of what they told me was that the Russians have her emails. I don't remember him saying, you can get them here, you can disseminate them this way, or anything along the lines of obtaining emails. It was a proclamation. It was a statement that he made to me, just verifying, I guess, what was openly speculated at the time. And it was emails. It wasn't any sort of dossier on Hillary Clinton that the Russian government had been putting together for quite some time. I remember, quote, thousands of emails, unquote. That's where the thousands come from. I don't think it could have been thousands of dossiers, so that's what I'm testifying to. When was the third meeting? You just described it, meeting with the FBI. Do you recall a meeting? I can't remember exactly the date, but I believe it was February, sometime in February of 2017. So the first meeting was in January. George, 27th. Question. The second meeting was, A, probably 4 or 5 days later, perhaps even January 31st, where I was asked to wear this wire. But that was just between Curtis Heidi and myself. And then after that, we had the whole entourage from Washington come to Chicago. And then no further meetings with the FBI? I don't believe I had another encounter with the FBI until I was arrested in July. I'm sorry, I said September. And when did you begin meeting with special counsel? Shortly after my arrest. And how many times have you met with special counsel? I think they said I had 4 proffer sessions. I think that's correct. I think you touched on this a little bit before, but one of the lead lines in the Carter Page Files application, quote, the FBI believes that the Russian government's efforts are being coordinated with Page and perhaps other individuals associated with Candidate 1's campaign, end quote. Did you coordinate any Russia efforts of any kind with Carter Page? Maybe my emails will suggest otherwise, but my memory suggests to me that I barely spoke to Carter Page in a real manner, let alone coordinate anything with this person. And did anyone ever, at any point in time, ever offer you a dossier at the Kremlin possessed on Hillary Clinton? I'm sure I should say dossier that. I have absolutely no memory of anyone doing that to me, no. Do you have a position on what the U.S.'s position should be towards Russia and the Ukraine? Regarding Ukraine, I don't think I had anything to do with Ukraine. I did give an interview to Interfax, which is a Russia media outlet, after I was approved to do so by the campaign in, I think, late September of 2016. And I made it very clear to that journalist that I was speaking on my own behalf. I wasn't speaking for the campaign or especially candidate Trump. Excuse me. Papadopoulos continues, so I guess the only, influential impact of some nature I had, possibly as a campaign official, regarding the Russia relationship was that interview I gave. And like we said before, I was trying to set up this meeting with Putin and Trump. That never materialized. Did you ever have any discussions about setting up a back channel to Russia between the campaign and Russia, which is completely legal and done all the time? If you want to call a back channel with, meaning campaign officials meeting with Russian officials overseas during the campaign, I don't consider that a back channel. I consider that just trying to set grounds for a meeting between the candidate and Putin, which was really my intention. Q. And that would have been a public meeting. People would have known about that meeting had you been successful in setting it up. That's why we wanted to make him a statesman, you know? That's the last thing we would have done is hide behind doors. I mean, that's really what it was. I wanted to make him look like a statesman and really show the world that this is why I went to meet this person instead of Russia, Russia, Russia all day. I went to meet Putin and explain to America and to the voters why I'm shaking this man's hand and why I think I can work with him. and that was really the logic in my mind at the time. And jumping around again, have you ever met with Christopher Steele? Never. When is the first time you heard that name? I believe it was when the Steele dossier became public with Sergei Millian's face, if it even was. I don't know, but I've never met with this person in my life. So you know what he looks like, so you know absolutely. Okay, Mr. Breitenbach. So on June 15, 2016, the Washington Post reported initially on the so-called hacked emails of the DNC. Yes. And again, maybe Hillary's emails were hacked off of her private server. Totally possible, but I still am not sure I believe it. I'm sorry, no. No, let me correct that. I've been arguing in circles all day. The Hillary emails, I totally believe were stolen. Totally. But the Podesta DNC emails were not hacked. Sorry. Hillary emails were hacked. Podesta DNC emails were stolen. Stolen off the server by someone directly. That's my opinion. And according to some very knowledgeable cybersecurity people, I should be correct, at least on the second part. Because Mueller has determined that the Russians got a hold of Hillary's emails and published them through WikiLeaks. I don't have any other information on that. We'll see what WikiLeaks says about it. Breitenbach. So on June 15, 2016, the Washington Post reported initially on the so-called hacked emails of the DNC. Yes. Do you recall when that story came out, whether you thought that was consistent with what Professor Mifsud had mentioned to you, or was that something different? I don't remember exactly what I was thinking, but I don't recall ever hearing of WikiLeaks, so I wasn't sure what was really going on. I don't think a lot of people in this country really knew what WikiLeaks or any of this was. But trying to think of what I was thinking at the time, I don't really think I was associating with what he told me to that. Okay, and just to clarify, you said that you've never discussed any information regarding the Clinton emails with anyone on the Trump campaign. Does that also include that you've never spoken to anyone on the Trump campaign regarding the hacked DNC emails? Yes, I would say so. Okay, do you recall being videotaped in any of your FBI interviews? My understanding is that there is a video of my first FBI interview. How do you understand that? I think I was told that by former counsel, but I never saw this video. You never saw any video equipment set up during your interview. No, I did not. Mr. Breitenbach. And I believe in one of the court filings, it indicates that you handed over all of your electronic devices. That's true. Can you tell us what devices those were? The devices I turned over were an iPhone, a cell phone I had in the UK, my laptop, an iPad, and I think that's it. Okay, just going really quickly into the timeline again. So on April 26th, you initially learned from Mifsud about the dirt, the thousands of emails. Then in May 2016, your first and only time, according to the testimony today, told someone, and that was the Greek foreign minister, about that conversation. In May, yes. Correct? That I knowingly told, yes. Then in June 15th, again, a mention that the initial reporting in the Washington Post comes out regarding the hacked DNC emails. But you were not initially interviewed until January of 2017. That's correct. We understand now that, I believe previously, Congressman Ratcliffe was indicating that you are generally considered the predication for the entire Trump-Russia investigation, which we now understand to have started at the end of July 2016, and which we now are pretty damn sure started well before that. So between July of 2016 and January 2017, you are the predicate of the investigation, but you're not interviewed until January of 2017. Is that correct? That's correct. And throughout that intervening period, from July of 2016 through January of 2017, you don't recall any instances where the FBI or anyone in the U.S. government was attempting to contact you or interview you. As I think I stated earlier, I have my suspicions about Burt Misuzawa, perhaps working on behalf of the U.S. intelligence reaching out Oh, openly you said? Yes. Oh, no, absolutely not. Not about this particular issue of me involved in a crime of some nature. Okay. Why would they have waited from when they had heard from, I'm sure at least from Downer, that he had talked with Papadopoulos, but Papadopoulos never gave up the dirt about the emails that Mifsud had told him previously, in an obvious setup to get George to gossip about it. They knew that. Why didn't they bring it up sooner during the campaign? Because they had nothing. Downer's tape of that conversation showed that George never brought up the emails. And the one conversation with the Greek foreign minister, there was no recording of that. So they couldn't prove that either. So they had nothing. But by waiting until after the election, waiting until January, they knew that his recollection would be off, and that they could possibly entrap him into something. Now remember, he still didn't give up anything. And then they tried to set him up with that Tawil guy, that Israeli, who handed him the marked $10,000. And then they didn't find it when they arrested him. So all they had was lying to the FBI and obstruction of justice. So they had nothing. And they finally tried to set him up, and it didn't work. So they had to go with the lying to the FBI. And was that deliberate? That's up to George to say. But I think to give him the benefit of the doubt would have been the American thing to do. Let's see. Openly you said. Papadopoulos. Let me just start with his answer again. As I think I stated earlier, I have my suspicions about Burt Misusawa, perhaps working on behalf of U.S. intelligence, reaching out. Oh, openly you said. Yes. Oh, no, absolutely not. About this particular issue of me involved in a crime of some nature. Miss Polisi. I'm sorry. Witness conferring with counsel. Papadopoulos. No, absolutely not. I don't recall any U.S. government official or intelligence official openly reaching out to me to talk about this. Mr. Breitenbach. Okay. Papadopoulos, issue that we are talking about today. So again, he was interrupted. Breitenbach. Okay, thank you. George. Yes. Mr. Baker. You've indicated a couple times today that you have records or emails that might help us. We would be very interested in getting them. If you could compile them and give them to counsel. She knows how to get a hold of me. That would really assist us in what we're doing and maybe formulate some additional follow-up questions if we would be able to reach out to you and close the loop on some things that might come out of those records. But we would definitely be interested in getting them. Certainly. You had indicated to my colleague that you had turned over different electronic devices. Was that subsequent to your arrest at the airport, or was that at a different time? As far as I remember, it was at the airport that my cell phone was seized. Were you given any kind of property inventory sheet for property that I was? Okay. I was at the airport, yes, but I believe that only my cell phone was kept and that I was given my, you know what, I would have to check my records just to make sure. All I know is that I turned over these electronics over at my encounters with the special counsel. I can't remember exactly what was taken at the airport, but I believe it was my cell phone, my iPhone. Okay. As you went traipsing around the world on this grand adventure that started out as a desire to work on a campaign and has brought you before the United States Congress, did anyone approach you for a potential setup in a compromising situation, i.e., offering you sex for information? Not explicitly, but Azra Turk, this young lady who was working with Stephen Halper, was indirectly, to the best of my memory, hinting that she was open to something like that. And was there an indication of information she wanted in exchange for that specific information? I mean, at the time, I just thought that she was, a a beautiful person that was working for Cambridge, but then you start to understand that's not really how things work. So, like I said, she never explicitly said, I will sleep with you for this, but her mannerisms and her behavior suggested that she was flirtatious, and she was very open to wanting something like that if I ended up providing what she wanted, whatever that was. I mean, she never told me, you provide this, then I sleep with you, if that makes sense. Q. Okay. A. It was just, I read between the lines, if that makes sense. You indicated, I think, your first FBI interview, you were not aware, or were not made aware that you were a subject of the investigation, that you were just being interviewed for information. Is that correct? That's my understanding. That's my memory. Yes. Exactly what they did to Flynn. Exactly. And just being very cognizant of the objection counsel raised last round, I'm just curious, were statements you made during that interview, were they the basis of any charges? Yes. Ms. Polisi, only during that. Papadopoulos, only during that interview, yes. By Mr. Baker. The interview where you were not aware that you were the subject of the investigation or a subject of the investigation? That's my understanding, yes. You believe your being interviewed was to assist the FBI for whatever else they were investigating. As I stated, the reason I went to talk to them was because I thought that this person, Sergei Milian, was probably a person of interest that I could help them with. And it was a voluntary interview, of course. I wasn't forced to go down. It was a voluntary interview. I was helping my country. Meadows. So let me get this straight. You went voluntarily to talk to the FBI to try to help them with an investigation of which they taped privately and then used that against you for the purpose of saying that you gave false testimony to them? That's my understanding, yes. Mr. Baker. Is this the interview you think was recorded, or was it the interview? A. It was. That's my understanding at this. The January 2017 interview was video recorded, and I guess they had some sort of wires on them too. Okay, so it seems to me a lot of, as I understand it, in the statement of your offense, a lot of it hinged on when you were on the campaign. I'm still a little confused as to when you were on the campaign, because it seems like in any other kind of job scenario you might interview, you might leave the interview thinking you got the job. You may subsequently talk to the employer and maybe get some sort of verbal offer, conditional or contingent on something. It doesn't seem to me that you were really on the campaign until sometime around the time the Post puts out the list of people who have been selected as foreign policy advisors, I think the 21st of March. And it seems like the dates of when you were supposed to know things or not know things on who you met and when you met them are very close in time to your being on the campaign, whenever that is. And I'm still confused when you were on the campaign. When do you think you were on the campaign? Yeah, I think I share your sentiment on this. It's very confusing. Sometimes I don't understand. But that seems to be a central point of the charges, that you did things or didn't do things based on when you were or weren't on the campaign. That's what it says. I haven't read it in a while, but I think you're absolutely right. So in other words, chicken shit reasons. And then there's another part I'm a little confused of, is it seems there's something about your assessment, I believe, of Mifsud, whether he was a nothing or whether he actually had valuable information. And I think your assessment of him changed throughout your course of dealing with him. So in your being, and again, I want to be cognizant of your objection, but I'm very curious if you were asked what his value was at one point in your relationship with him, it may have been very high. But after the totality of your dealings with him, it may have been very low. So I think it's very subjective as to what his value was, but yet there seems to be a charge relating to your assessment of his values. A. Perhaps this is why I needed this type of counsel in the beginning of my interactions with these people, because, Q, I'm not just confused. Is that your concern too? Is that right? Yes. I have to finally admit that. How did you support yourself? I mean, are you independently wealthy? I'm trying to figure this all out. Well, I mean, and I'm not trying to get personal, but I mean, if you're working for a job where you don't really get paid and you're traveling all over, I couldn't have done that. Let's put it that way. And so, well, fortunately, I was paid on the Carson campaign, a good amount of money. Well, to me, it was a good amount of money, plus some savings and medals. So you had assets. Papadopoulos. Assets, yeah, plus family support too. I have a good family, and they backed me while I was on this adventure, and they wanted me to succeed, so they helped me out. Meadows. So have you asked for any of this information, that the videotapes, the things? I have a real concern about Fourth Amendment violations here, just in what I'm hearing. And I guess my concern is, what I don't want to do is sweep away Fourth Amendment right concerns. So have you requested this information and been denied this information? Witness conferring with counsel. Papadopoulos. I gave up my right to discovery after the guilty plea, and my current counsel has attempted to retrieve this information, but they were denied. And they could probably add more to that than I can. He mentioned this earlier, and it struck me, and since it's been brought up again, I have to comment on it. In what possible world would you give up your rights to discovery? He's mentioned previous counsel or ex-counsel before, and maybe this is why they're no longer working for him, because they screwed him to the wall, helping out Mueller every way they could and not helping out Papadopoulos. Why would you waive your right to discovery? Because they told him if he didn't, they would probably throw the book at him. They would come up with more charges, and he'd be in for it. So there's a Fourth Amendment violation right there. Now, I'm speculating. I have no proof of this. But for what other reason would you give away such a fundamental right as an American citizen, especially someone involved in a very, very serious legal process, to give up discovery? So you give up discovery, and Baker Act, or the Baker Rule, is thrown out. There's no exculpatory evidence that has to be provided to you or to your defense counsel. Again, this is why the judge only gave him 14 days, and he served 12. And the writing was on the wall that Mueller just wanted to trample him like a bug to get something out of him. Meadows. I think it's important for the record that this committee look into those documents and request those documents officially. And so that would be my recommendation to both the chairmen to do so. Polisi. We would really appreciate that. Papadopoulos. Say that again. Polisi. We would really appreciate that. Mr. Breitenbach. Do you recall Peter Strzok or his name being mentioned in any of your 3 meetings with the FBI? I don't recall his name ever coming up. You did indicate that you were asked to wear a wire, correct? Yes. And that was by an FBI agent, Curtis Heide. At any point, have you actually collected intelligence on anyone on the Trump campaign or within the Trump orbit? No. Regarding a wire or me going out into the wilderness and collecting intelligence, absolutely not. So just to be clear, you've been tasked, you have been requested to wire yourself to record someone connected to you, and that was Professor Mifsud, but you have never been. Have you ever been tasked or requested to be tasked to record anyone within the Trump campaign? No. Thank you, Mr. Baker. When the agent discussed the idea of wearing a wire with you, was any script about what you were supposed to say or do discussed or provided? Or, as far as I recall, he basically told me we're going to pay you, and you're going to kind of have a sneak peek of an FBI operation, and it's going to be in London. I can't believe that. You're going to have a sneak peek of an FBI operation, and it's going to be in London. Now, on previous transcripts that I've read, the Page transcript and the Strzok transcript, it came up several times in redactions that there was a trip taken by the FBI to a place that they would not reveal, and certain people that could not be revealed were on that trip. And I've always thought that was a trip to the UK to try to catch George. And that's when Halper or his wire, that they were there to monitor that conversation. I have seen no proof of that, but just what I'm reading between the lines, I think that's what happened. That when George was being pumped by Halper to admit to doing things he hadn't done, about hacking emails and delivering emails to to Trump through Russia, I think they were there listening in on that conversation. George has already said he's almost positive Halper was wired. So it makes sense. And Ray says, thank you, sir. May I have another one? Ignorant of the law, plead the fifth. Absolutely. Absolutely. But again, I mean, here's what happens. He's in the shower. His phone rings. Or he's coming out of the shower. His phone rings. And it's the FBI. We're at your house. We want to talk to you. I'll be right down. Goes out, meets him at the door. We want to talk to you about your friend in New York. George thinking they're talking about Sergei because his name had just been in the paper about releasing the Steele dossier to the media. And George is like, you know what? I've had some things about this guy. Maybe I know, maybe I don't know. I'll go talk to them. And they record him. They record him getting the dates wrong on when he was told by by Mifsud about the Clinton emails, Russia having them, versus his time when he started on the campaign. It was the one time he lied. Or got things mixed up, whatever you prefer. So they corralled him under false pretenses, again, just like Flynn, and set him up. Oh, this makes me angry. This makes me very angry. Going to kind of have a sneak peek of an FBI operation, and it's going to be in London. But I didn't hear anything else as far as I recall. But what I do know as a fact is that Joseph Mifsud was in Washington, D.C., speaking at a State Department's type conference, I think a week after I was interviewed by the FBI. So if he was supposed to be talked to, they could have easily talked to him in Washington or detained him, or I assume that's how it could happen, but thank you, Mr. Meadows. So as we look at this, I think getting our head around all of this is it's hard to believe that it happened in the United States of America. And I think that's the trouble I have with it. I've seen nothing in the classified setting. For the record, I purposely have not gone into a classified setting to see things so that I can try to put this piece of the puzzle together. It is my belief that you were taped at some point or another by one of these officials, whether it be Mifsud or whether it be Downer or whether it be Halper. I don't know which one of them did it, but I believe that certainly it is my strong belief that you were taped. Has anyone in the Department of Justice indicated to you that they may have a tape of a private conversation that you had with any one of these three individuals? Papadopoulos, that I know of personally or that I've seen, I do not. No person from the Department of Justice has told me that. No. Meadows, I guess if they had that, before you plead guilty, wouldn't that be something that they should have provided to you or let you know that there was exculpatory evidence out there? Absolutely. And that would have changed my calculus 100%. Okay, so you perhaps would not have pleaded guilty if you had known that there was this tape of a private conversation with one of the three individuals that I just mentioned? That's correct. I guess my thought process at the time, Meadows, because it could potentially have been a setup. George, absolutely could have been. And just going back in my memory, I guess the logic behind my guilty plea was that I thought I was really in the middle of a real Russia conspiracy, and this was all real, and that I had to plead out or face life in prison, the way they were making it seem. Again, they steamrolled him. After this conversation, and after much information that's come out, it's clear that I was completely off my calculus. Baker, were you ever actually told that on the extreme end of a sentence, you could get life in prison? No. But when I was in front of the magistrate after I was arrested in Washington, I guess Alexandria or wherever I was, they basically had a 25-year prison sentence they were talking about. about lying to the FBI 5 years, and on obstruction of justice 20 years. So you're sitting there. I hadn't slept in like 30 hours, and I'm hearing these things, and it was insane. You hadn't slept in 30 hours? Not properly. I had come off a transatlantic flight, and I'm sleeping on a concrete mattress with 2 criminals in a cell. So they actually took him to jail, of all things. Again, lying to the FBI. They arrested him and threw him in jail before he saw a magistrate. Couldn't get a hold of his lawyer. Couldn't have him turn himself in because they wanted that money that he did not have with him, much to their chagrin and embarrassment and all around unhappiness. So they had to make something up. And this is the time you're talking about the plea. This is during my arrest, my detention, going in front of the magistrate, and then what the prosecutors were talking to the magistrate about. And then, of course, I saw my former counsel in Chicago after that. So benefit for pleading was that there wouldn't be this extreme sentence that you were made to believe you could get? Certainly. Were there other charges that they opted not to bring? Yeah, I was initially charged with an obstruction charge. And also, and that was the big charge, the big money to get him to fold. And also, I don't know if this was a real charge or if it was a threat of acting as an Israeli agent that I mentioned earlier, but in exchange for that, I was offered 1 count of lying to the FBI. And again, to get information from him, information he didn't have, and they probably knew he didn't have, but they were going to squeeze him for every drop because that's how Mueller operated. Who mentioned the idea of you acting as an Israeli agent? I believe it was Andrew Goldstein, the prosecutor from the special counsel's team. During the last meeting I had with them, he said something along the lines of, "This is our last meeting. We have to make a decision. It's either you're going to accept 1 count of lying to the FBI, or we're going to charge you with obstruction." I think he said maybe even multiple counts of lying and acting as a foreign agent of Israel. So again, this is why he has former counsel. Baker, did that relate to the $10,000? To this day, I don't know what it relates to. I don't. It could be a combination of many things, but they were very sensitive about that, and actually had notified my previous counsel that it's up to them, meaning my previous counsel, if we would like that to be in the status of offense or not. But it didn't seem that they were very enthusiastic about, meaning the special counsel, wasn't enthusiastic about actually putting that in. So I don't understand what that charge is all about. All I know is it came from Andrew Goldstein's mouth. That's his name, Andrew Goldstein? Meadows. Andrew Weissman? No, Goldstein. I dealt with 3 prosecutors, Janine Rhee, Aaron Zelinsky, and Adam Goldstein. I believe his name is Adam Goldstein. Meadows. Let the record, there is an Andrew Goldstein. Papadopoulos. Yeah, it's Goldstein. It's not Weissman. And Weissman is a miserable human being, in my opinion. There's a book. It just came out a little while ago. It's called License to Lie. And it's by a woman who worked with Weissman and Mueller on the Enron prosecution and on the prosecution of a Merrill Lynch. Actually, I don't think she was there for the Merrill Lynch, but she might have been the defense counsel for a Merrill Lynch trader who they railroaded. It's a very interesting subject matter. If you're interested in what's been going on with this whole thing, and you want to know more about the players involved, even after the investigation being over, License to Lie. Look into it. You know what? Let me make sure that that's the name of it. I don't want to get it wrong. Yeah. Yeah, licensed, not licensed, Licensed to Lie by Sidney Powell. I will put a link to that in the description. Papadopoulos. Yeah, it's Goldstein. It's not Weissman. There's an Andrew Weissman, and then there's an Andrew Goldstein, so it's Goldstein. Baker. It's Andrew Goldstein that's reflected on the government's sentencing memorandum. Papadopoulos. That's him, yeah. So now Mr. Breitenbach. We have a photo here from, it looks like NBC News, from the caption of Andrew Goldstein. Can I show you this photo and just see if this is the person that's indicated? A, that's him. Okay, thank you. Actually, one more question. Have you ever registered under FARA, Foreign Agent Registration Act? Never. Have you ever been advised whether that was necessary for performing particular activities overseas? Never. Thank you. Summers. That's the end of the hour. That's the end of our hour. Papadopoulos, thank you very much. Okay, so they take a break, and we're on the last legs here. We've just got a little ways to go. Saxman Grooms. The time is 4:38. We'll go back on the record. She continues. Mr. Papadopoulos, I had a couple of questions following up from what happened at the end of the last round. Mr. Meadows was asking you a number of questions about your decision to plead guilty based on what appeared to be a hypothetical set of facts and some hypothetical exculpatory evidence. I'm not sure what actually it was. And it sounded like to me you were saying that if you had known that hypothetical set of facts and that hypothetical exculpatory evidence, you would have decided not to plead guilty. Is that right? Answer, hypothetically. Question, I'm sorry. Answer, hypothetically, yes. Hypothetically, you would have decided not to. If the information that Congress Meadows referred to is there, then yes, I agree. Is it your position here today that you did not lie to the FBI during your first interview? Oh man, I can't believe she asked that question. And Polisi is right on top of it. Polisi, I'm just going to advise my client not to answer that. Saxman Grooms is Polisi. We have the statement of the offense and the guilty plea in front of you, so we stick by that. Saxman Grooms, you do, that's yes. Polisi, yes. Saxman Grooms. So my question is, let's enter it into the record, is it? Okay, great, it's Exhibit 1. Do you have a copy of it to look at? I pleaded to what I pleaded to, so that's exactly correct on the record, yes. And you stand by this Exhibit 1, the statement of the offense? Polisi, I don't know how many more questions we're going to have him re-verifying or having you read, Saxman Grooms. I just want to do it once. He hasn't done it. You did it. Polisi, I'm instructing him not to answer that question. Saxman Grooms, you don't want him? Polisi, I do not want him to answer that question. Saxman Grooms, you don't want him to say whether he stands? Polisi, I do not. Saxman Grooms, by the statement? Polisi, I don't want to engage in this conversation. Thank you. Love this woman. See, this is the counsel that George should have had before. If he had had that counsel before, I doubt he would have served an hour in a cell at any point in time. Man, I want those people's names, those lawyers' names, so I can avoid them at all costs. You never know. So next time you all are in trouble and you wonder if counsel is going to be good for you or not, just ask them, were you the original counsel for George Papadopoulos? That right there will strike them or recommend them. And Ray says, people lie on a daily basis but don't fear going to jail. If so, we would all be cracking rocks upstate. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, absolutely. I think I said earlier, if you've never lied to a relative or a good friend, or even someone in a position of authority like your boss, then you're a much better person than I am. And George didn't know he was being investigated. They set him up. Saxman Grooms. When you spoke to the FBI the first time, did you tell them that you met with Mr. Mifsud and that he communicated to you the information about Hillary Clinton's emails? Polisi, I think we've been over this more than 3 or 4 times. To the extent you want to know anything outside of what's in that agreement, he's happy to answer questions. He's been very open and honest. I would direct him not to answer questions directly related to the plea agreement. Saxman Grooms. He's already answered questions directly related to the plea agreement. Polisi, yeah. and I'm telling not to answer these questions. Mr. Pierce, we're not going to do this. So you can keep doing this, but he's not going to answer. There may be further legal proceedings related to this. He's not going to go down this road today, period. All right, police, he's getting some backup. Saxman Grooms, is it your position today that you told the truth in all of your communications to the FBI? Policey, I'm going to instruct him not to answer that question. Saxman Grooms, can you explain to us why you refuse to wear a wire? Answer, I don't feel comfortable answering that question at this moment, but the fact is I did not wear a wire. And following your decision not to wear a wire, did you call Mr. Trump's lawyer, Mr. Casamati? Who is Mr. Casamati? I'm sorry, Mark Kasowitz. Policey, don't answer. Papadopoulos, I don't want to answer that. Saxman Grooms, I'm sorry, you don't want to answer? Papadopoulos, on the advice of my counsel. Policey, I am instructing him not to answer. Papadopoulos, on the advice of my counsel, I'm not going to answer that. Oh, man. And see, again, the Democrats here, they're doing one of two things. They're trying to connect Papadopoulos to a Russian incursion that never happened. That was their first line of questioning. And now it's, are you a bad person? So it's not about getting to any kind of truth. It's just about impugning his character. And thankfully, Papadopoulos has the kind of representation in this setting that is doing him well and doing him right. Or doing right by him, I think is the proper terminology. They are not letting the Democrats try to rip him apart. I am very proud of these people. I like George Papadopoulos. And because I identify with George Papadopoulos. I was young and dumb once. I'm now old and dumb. But these are great people. They're really standing up for him. Saxman Grooms, I believe in a previous round you described that you had discussions with the FBI about paying a fine for the $10,000. Is that accurate? That's a hell of a poorly worded question. Can you repeat the question, please? Sure. Did you agree to pay back the government a fine for $10,000? Policey, it's Papadopoulos. I believe that's on the sentencing memorandum, what was agreed to between my government and my former lawyers. Saxman Grooms, did you agree to it or just your former lawyers? Policey, the whole line of questioning, again, I'm going to instruct him not to answer these questions. He doesn't have to answer these. We're here on a voluntary basis. He doesn't want to talk about it. Saxman Grooms, well, he did say, Policey, I don't want him to talk about it. Saxman Grooms, that in a hypothetical sense, he would not have pleaded guilty. So I'm just trying to get a little more information about Policey, and that's where it ends. Saxman Grooms, what he's talking about. Policey, I'm instructing him not to answer these questions. Saxman Grooms, when the government asked you to pay the $10,000 fine, were they asking for the specific $10,000 that you said previously was in the account in Greece, like they wanted that cash, the physical money, or Policey, I'm going to instruct him not to answer this question too. Saxman Grooms, what's the basis for that? Policey, the basis that I don't want him to answer the question. Saxman Grooms, just Pierce, Mr. Pierce, he's here voluntarily. He doesn't have to answer your questions. Ms. Saxman Grooms, sure, he can. He can absolutely refuse to answer questions. Mr. Pierce, that's what he's doing. And we're just giving you a heads up. You can keep doing this, but it's not helpful. Move on now if you keep doing this. Saxman Grooms, well, he's discussed extensively this $10,000, and I'm just trying to clarify what the understanding was with the repayment of the $10,000, which is not actually repayment, it's a fine. And I'm just trying to clarify that that was a fine and not a repayment. Policey, I think it's all pretty well laid out in all the papers. Saxman Grooms, last month there was a court filing entered by your previous attorney, sentencing memorandum, I think it's Exhibit 2. It states, and I quote, while some in the room rebuffed George's offer, Mr. Trump nodded with approval and deferred to Mr. Sessions, who appeared to like the idea and stated that the campaign should look into it. This is around the March 31, 2016 meeting. A, that was at the March 31 meeting. Q, did that occur? Yes. Mr. Trump nodded with approval. Nodded, which, when somebody nods, you usually think they're thinking, or it's some sort of tacit approval. Yes. And it was your appearance. Well, it was your impression that Mr. Sessions also appeared to like the idea. Yes. Do you recall what he said exactly? Now we're back to Russia, Russia, Russia. At this moment, I can't recall exactly what he said. Whatever he did, I felt that he was enthusiastic, and that's why he continued to pursue this avenue. This document described that you were giddy. It said, George's giddiness over Mr. Trump's recognition was prominent during the days that followed. Were you giddy? Oh my God. Pierce and... I already forgot her last name. Pelosi. I was going to say Pelosi. Sorry, Miss Pelosi. Pierce and Pelosi laid Saxman Grooms to waste. And now she's stuck with asking George if he was giddy. Were you giddy? I think those are my lawyer's words, not mine. I was happy to see that there might have been some tacit approval of what I was attempting to do. So if you call that giddy, then yes, I was giddy. And did you share your happiness about the tacit approval from Mr. Trump with your actions with anybody? Did you talk to anyone about this? Talk to who about that? Anyone? Well, basically, the senior officials at the campaign were at that meeting, from Corey Lewandowski to Michael Glasner, Hope Hicks. So I'm pretty sure, assuming that they had gone to the restroom while I was talking, I'm pretty sure everyone who was a senior level official in the campaign heard me very clear on what I was talking about on March 31. Q. Sure. Following the meeting, did you talk to anyone else outside the campaign about how you had this idea and it was an idea that you thought the president liked and you were moving forward with it? I can't remember if I specifically told Joseph Misford, who was obviously my point man about this potential meeting, if that Trump himself liked it or not. But I clearly was trying to coordinate the summit between Putin and Trump using what I thought were Joseph Misford's extensive contacts to Russia. Q. Sure. Did you... Sometimes when people are excited about things, they share them with friends. Did you tell any friends? I don't remember that I was talking to friends about what I was doing on official campaign business. No. You explained previously that Professor Misford had a connection to and introduced you to Ivan Timofeyev. Is that right? Via email, yes. And did he explain at the time what the purpose of that introduction was? I assume he did. I just can't remember exactly the specific language of the introduction. But I have those emails, and I'm more than happy to share those interactions with the committee. This was yes, thank you very much, and we'd appreciate that. Was that interaction as part of the attempt to get the president's meeting with Mr. Putin? I assume that's what it was about. Did you always communicate with Mr. Timofeyev over email, or did you ever speak to him? It was predominantly over email, and then I believe we had a couple Skype calls and probably a couple Facebook messages, but I never met him face-to-face in person. Do you remember what the content of these discussions were over email? Something along the lines of, how can we set up this meeting between Trump and Putin? And I think as I mentioned earlier, I forwarded an email from him to Paul Manafort about some signature that the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs wanted to see if this was a real proposal. And as we all know now, that Paul Manafort, I don't even think he responded to me. And at that time, Mr. Timofeyev was the director of programs with the Russian International Affairs Council. Is that right? That's my understanding, yes. Why did you think at the time that he was talking to Russian officials in the Russian government? If my memory serves me well, I think in some emails he stated that he could introduce me to some people at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But like I said, I could give you those emails. I can't go in my memory and try to recite what I wrote or he wrote to me 2 years ago. That's why I'm more than happy to provide those to you. But he was representing to you, generally speaking, in a number of those emails that he was able to communicate with the Russian government in order to set up this meeting, right? Excuse me. That's my understanding, yes. And you believed him at the time. I had no reason not to. So is it fair to say at the time that you were speaking to him, you believe that he was well connected within the Russian government. At the time, I knew that he was working at RIAC, and that he could potentially be this intermediary for this potential summit between Trump and Putin or any campaign trip to Russia that we might have done. Did Mr. Timofeyev ever introduce you to any Russian nationals? As I've stated, I never met Timofeyev in my life face to face, so I'm just trying to go back in my memory and see if he actually copied any Russian nationals on an email. I don't recall that, but as I stated, I'm more than happy to share all communication I have with this person. Great, thank you. Yes. Do you recall him introducing to you any other people in the emails or when you spoke to him by phone? I don't recall. But the emails should be in our possession, and we're more than happy to provide them. And at the time you were communicating with Mr. Timofeyev about scheduling the Trump-Putin meeting, were you then relaying those communications back to the Trump campaign? Is that right? As far as I remember, I kept the campaign fully aware of what I was attempting to achieve, and that was set up this potential meeting between Trump and Putin, or have some campaign officials go to Europe or Russia. And at any time, did someone tell you to stop? I don't remember an explicit stop, but there was a moment where I learned, I guess due to common sense, that this wasn't something that the campaign wanted to pursue. But perhaps somebody did tell me to stop. I just can't remember off the top of my head right now. Q. And I'm trying to get a sense of how you understood through your common sense that the campaign wanted you to stop and when that was. You explained that pretty damn well earlier on, sweetie. The RNC convention was in July of 2016. Do you remember whether you thought you were still supposed to be moving forward with the Trump-Putin meeting at that point? By that time, I don't think so. Actually, quite frankly, I was. I think I had been shut down a month before that. I'm not sure, though. Mueller man was blinded by the light. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Yes, and as the Washington Post says, dear Ray, what is it? Democracy dies in the darkness. Pretty sure that's what it is. Democracy dies in the darkness. I can't believe I'm having trouble remembering it right now. It's been drummed in my head so many times over these last months. But sunlight is the best disinfectant by far. And hopefully we're going to be shining a ton of light on the FBI and DOJ real soon. Again, I think we're going to see a lot of things come out once the IG report on the FBI investigation into Crossfire Hurricane comes out. I don't know why I moved the camera. That was silly. Sorry about that. Let's see, continuing with George. As I said, these are all in emails, and we're more than happy to share them with you, so I just can't go and jog my memory about specific month from 2 years ago. So I don't want to comment further, but I'm more than happy to share those emails with the committee. And when you stopped trying to set up the meeting between the candidate and Mr. Putin was, I understand at some point, you shifted over to trying to go to schedule a meeting yourself or with other campaign officials. Is that right? There was a moment where that was an idea. I don't remember when that was happening, but certainly there was an idea that either I floated or somebody floated that we might be interested in going abroad to meet officials. But then, of course, that never happened. Yeah, it never happened. Keep an eye on that, Downs. Yeah, and they're still going to be screaming about all this in Congress, in the House. They're demanding that they're going to be able to subpoena Mueller and Barr and get all of the work product, get every sentence that was written down in Mueller's report read into the Congressional record, as if there's no such thing as sources and methods, which, you know, as a person who was screaming for the original FISA application to be released, I was saying I didn't give a damn about sources and methods. And you know what? Maybe I should just shut up about that with the Mueller probe too. But the one thing I don't want to see is grand jury testimony being released. The 6E testimony. That would be a disaster because all of those people would be immediately rounded up by Nadler and Schiff and put through hell. And I don't want to see that. And there's no reason for that to happen. The FISA warrant was not grand jury testimony. And we are going to see that. So, and as George stated, but then of course that never happened. Do you remember if that idea came up? I mean, the team as a whole never went abroad. Of course, I was abroad meeting with officials, but there was no organized trip of the campaign going abroad that I was a part of. Do you remember if the discussions about the team from the campaign meeting with Russian officials abroad happened shortly after the decision to not send the president to go meet with Russian officials? I don't know that off the top of my head. And who did you discuss with at the campaign the idea of campaign officials going to go meet with Russian officials abroad? I believe that there was a short period in which Sam Clovis, myself, and Waleed Faries were discussing this potential trip. There could have been others copied on an email, something like that, but that's what I remember at this moment. And that would not have been illegal. It would not have even been improper. But the Dems, Russia, Russia, Russia. Q. And I believe you said earlier that the reason Mr. Clovis didn't do it was that he was busy. Is that right? That was my understanding, yes. What about the other individual? Do you remember why he wasn't involved ultimately in doing it? I can't remember actually. I just know that we never went together. I'm going to switch gears to the April 2016 Mayflower speech. Yep. You already explained that you were there. Where? You went to the speech. No, I wasn't. Oh, you didn't? No. And I want the record to state that I was not at that meeting. I think I was in London at the time, so I just want to make sure that's clear. I was communicating from London, or wherever I was, with Stephen Miller and providing edits to the speech via email, but I wasn't at the actual event in Washington, D.C. I think I received a late invite. I can't remember, but I just wasn't there. That's all I know. Great, thanks. So following... Sorry. Q, are you okay? Following the Mayflower speech that same day, you sent an email to Mr. Timofeyev saying, that's the signal to meet. Can you explain what you were talking about? At that point, if I'm recalling exactly what my mindset was, I think I was just acting a little rogue, just to be quite frank. I wasn't following instructions of the campaign about that. No one from the campaign, as far as I remember, told me, go tell, see our Russian contacts. That was just kind of me trying to make a name for myself and make sure that I still have this person, Ivan, I guess, a part of what I was trying to accomplish. But does that make sense? It was just me talking up to him on my own, as far as I remember. I don't think anyone from the campaign instructed me to tell Ivan this is a signal to meet, if that makes sense. Is there something that Mr. Trump said during the speech that you thought signaled that would be the signal to meet, essentially? I really can't remember exactly what Mr. Trump said during that speech, but I'm more than happy to review it and come back to you. Ms. Saxman-Grooms, okay, thank you very much. That's all we have for today. Mr. Papadopoulos, thank you very much. Whereupon at 5:01 p.m., the interview was concluded. And that is that, folks. The entire George Papadopoulos, October 25th, testimony in executive session with the Committee on the Judiciary and the Committee on Government Reform and Oversight. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Ray especially, I really appreciate your coming by. It's always wonderful to have you in the chat. I'm sorry that this went late. I'm sure people have better things to do than listen to me babble on, so I won't go on much longer. Just remember to like this on YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'd appreciate it, but that's up to you. It doesn't change anything on the channel. It's just nice to know people are interested. As I stated the other day, what I really worry about, I shouldn't say worry, that's not right at all. What I look at are the views. Are people watching the content? And it doesn't take very many views to make me happy. I'll tell you that right now. And with the new algorithm being out, that's slowly being fixed, podcasts or vlogs like this, videos like this, are very difficult to find. Because if you right now go out and type in Papadopoulos, Papadopoulos testimony or Papadopoulos transcript, you're probably not going to find this channel. You're going to see stuff from CNN and ABC and MSNBC and all that. You're not going to see this channel. Hopefully that's going to change in the coming days, but right now it ain't happening. So anyway, everyone be well. Thank you for coming. I promise the next transcript that pops up, I'll do it as soon as practicable. I will, of course, if it's late in the day when it comes up, I'll defer to the following morning. But I will give you as much notice as possible. And I promise, when the Mueller report is released, it will be read on this channel. I don't care how long it is. It may take several days, but it's going to get read into the record on this channel. So thank you all. I appreciate your being here once again. Ray, everyone else, have a good night. Bye-bye.